Okay, Assalamu alaikum. So we're having to record this because some teachers are away on holiday, and there's just one thing I wanted to say, that Ustad Aqifa's unable to come in today because someone from her family, friend's mum passed away. So if you can remember her in your du'as as well, inshallah. The recording that we're doing, this is going to be like strictly internal use mainly for those teachers who are not here. However, the resources and everything else, it's for everyone. For the recording, because when we're doing group work, we may have to put the camera on the table, so it's not going to go out to anyone else. It will be on a private link, which is only going to be shared with the teachers who are absent today. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah, and we'll keep it towards the actual work as opposed to being a teacher. Okay. Any questions before we start? No. Okay. How's everyone feeling? Everyone's got their teas and everything else. You got your. Okay, so as you can see, we're going to be doing three different things, but we may just kind of mix them up a bit. So the first session is going to be on teaching pedagogy and epistemology. We'll talk about what they are and our favourite words. Okay. That's going to be the first session. It's going to be more lecture-like, the first session. So you might get a bit bored, but we'll try and make sure there's times where we do a bit of discussion as well. The second session will be the second session will be about using questioning as an effective way of teaching students. Okay, so using questioning as an effective way of teaching students. And also, alongside that, we're going to talk about special educational needs. And because from January onwards, our madrasa is focusing on special needs, and we're going to expand our department. And one of the reasons why we've had to do that is because we have near to about 40 students with special needs in our madrasa. Now that's a very large number, even for schools. Okay? Even they would find that very difficult. And for example, there's so many academies, so many schools have become academies. Academies have slightly different rules where they can even reject children with special needs. I remember it's about 2 years ago, I was working with a child with ADHD, extreme ADHD. And he lived in Kensington. And most of the schools there were academies. And what happened was he couldn't get into any of them because of his special needs. And they're allowed to kind of reject these things. So I had to be with him for like about, I think, 8 months, and we used to study in a library in Kensington. So it's tough. So what we've come up with a plan to build on our special educational needs department to help students with special needs. Now, even on Friday, I was at a local mosque doing some training there, and there obviously they said, look, we don't have any special needs kids. And now the reason for that is because parents are well aware of their child's or their children's needs, and they don't feel that madrasa. Oh, Sheikh, would you like to come forward? Okay. Sheikh, you can come forward, so there's like you seem very sad, Sheikh, as on the corner of the table. So the reason why local madrasas don't have special needs children is parents feel that they cannot facilitate, as in that the madrasas cannot facilitate, so therefore they no longer send them. And then what happens is, so if there is a madrasa that can try and facilitate, a lot of the students will attend that madrasa. Okay, so even when we had Sami, for instance, who was blind, he was always like thankful and grateful that our madrasa accepted him. And at that time we didn't have any places, but we made arrangements. So that's going to be the bit about effective questioning, but also special educational needs. And Ustad Daniel will do about a 25-minute workshop with yourselves and give some handouts for that as well. And right at the end, we'll go through the more practical side of things, where we'll go through a lesson plan, the basic structures of a lesson plan. So learning objectives, what are they, how they look like, how we're supposed to come up with them. Now understand, some of us are teaching assistants, we don't do lesson planning. Okay? But I think it's crucial to understand what the teachers are doing in order to understand how they're structuring a lesson. And the idea of us having one teacher in the class and up to about 2 teaching assistants is that at some point teaching assistants will also become teachers. So that's the plan, that's the aim. That there will come a time where those of us who are teaching assistants now will no longer be teaching assistants. You'll come in the place of a teacher, and then you'll have to mentor your teaching assistants. So we want to kind of be like a factory as well, trying to produce more teachers. So there will come a time where we're hoping that Walthamstow will have the best madrasas and mosques in London, and then hopefully London will be, and will expand like this. That's the plan. And lastly, like I said, so structure of a lesson plan: starter, the main, the plenary, and then also how to add questioning to that, how to focus on special needs in that. We're going to do that towards the end, once we've had lots of discussion on this. And then you'll get some time in pairs, or I think in fours, to go to actually plan a lesson, trying to apply all of what we're discussing now. So that's where you can take notes as well. So what I've done is, for the first session, I've given these PowerPoints, but I haven't done that for the other sessions. If you want PowerPoint for that, they will be available on the website somewhere later on. Okay. And if you want the printout, if everyone's interested in that, I can print them out. I didn't know if anyone, how much we were going to make use of that. I'll give these out now. Oh, check. If whoever came in afterwards, you can take one each of these before we start. Yeah. Anyone else missing on these? Okay, so should we start? Like I said, because it's FES and our teachers have been doing a lot of this anyway, so I'm going to go through this very quickly. With the other madrasas, this session is the longest that we have. We spend a lot of time on this, because with a lot of madrasas, it is about making them more aware of what madrasas are about. So, important question: what is a madrasa? Okay. So before we start, if we can, with our partner, for 2 minutes, well actually 60 seconds, discuss two questions. Okay. So this is part of epistemology. Okay? What we mean by that here is, what is education? Okay. What is it? Oh, fantastic. So what is education? Now this question would vary for so many people. Okay, so if I ask this question to a child who lived in Damascus and whose dad had a farm on the outskirts of Damascus, what education is, the answer he would give is knowing how to use some of the tools. For him, that's everything. That is education. But what is education today for us? That's the first question. What is it? And secondly, where does madrasa fit into that? Where does madrasa fit into that? So what is education? And where does the whole concept of... And by madrasa, when we're talking about madrasas today, we're talking about these after-school schools. Okay, we're not talking about rooms, we're not talking about all these big institutes, but these after-school mosque institutes, if we can call them that. Okay, so your 60 seconds start now. So what is education? Where does madrasa fit into that? So you can do that in your pairs or your threes. Okay, you have 30 seconds. I'll give you 30 more seconds.
it's one of the most powerful positions in society.
When you're close, you're
More willing to learn.
write it down. Do it in the class.
Okay, you have 15 seconds.
Yeah, the other thing is to wipe out, blot out.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, right, so I have a cup in my hand. Inside this cup I have everyone's names. Okay, so to be fair, as much as possible, pull out a name and we'll continuously do that so everyone gets a turn to give answers. And everyone stays awake, hopefully. Okay. So, and all you've got to respond to me about is what you discussed in your pairs. Okay? Oh, what's that in Nashina? So what did you discuss?
So we discussed what is education. The first thing that came to my mind was education is key.
Oh, is key. Could you expand on that?
It's just the key to...
Oh, actually, let's bounce this on the next person. Yeah. Education is key. Oh, there's a blank one.
Oh,
oh, Ustad Zahida, could you expand on what Ustad Nashida said? And what's your ideas on that? Or would you like her to expand first?
I would say education is just education, not madrasa education.
Okay.
Education is key to building perspective and experience and understanding in the individual's life.
Okay, fantastic. Ustad Asma, what would you say about that? How would you expand or build on that?
I would say that education is also the key for success in society as well, just to sort of develop and grow and get a better job or, you know.
Okay, so you're talking about career here. So education is a pathway to a career. Okay, interesting. Let's see. Oh, Mufti. What did you guys discuss?
Quite similar. We had a discussion between whether it's about education, or experience.
Oh.
Learning or experience.
Could you also now talk about where madrasa fits into this?
Okay, because if it's just about learning or learning of information and facts, that's just one aspect of the overall experience a child can gain. That experience keeps it more broad and bringing a lot more into the madrasa, where it's not just about learning facts.
Okay, so talking about learning of facts as well as part of the bigger picture. So we can't just say that facts is everything, and we can't say it's nothing at all as well. It does play a part. Okay. Oh, what's that, Adil?
We said education is remembering, understanding and applying, but the experience part comes in where the relationship is built between the teacher and the student. So again, that's also key towards the experience of the student.
No, that's brilliant. No, absolutely. I can remember what you're saying. I can remember when I was invited to Institute of Education after I wrote my master's thesis, and one of the main things we spoke about was how in secular education the sacredness of knowledge has been taken out, right? The sacredness of education, because as a matter of fact, I think what differentiates us with animals is the fact that we have intelligence. We're intellectual beings, as opposed to animals who are not intellectual in that way. Okay? One last one, and we're ready to move on. Oh, Mr. Sadeh. Could you add to, or could you like conclude on some of these points?
I was just going to say, education, it helps you nurture you as a person,
Okay.
as a whole, and it gives you that.
So can I ask you a question on this now? So what A level are you doing at the moment?
Maths, chemistry.
So maths. Let's stop on that one. So how has maths nurtured you as a person?
It's giving me the skills.
Oh, you're developing. You're doing well. Sorry. Oh, could you give me an example of where you use math to solve a problem? Can you just give me one example? Oh, sorry, something you want to add to
Someone
that?
gives you the wrong change.
Okay, interesting, yeah. No, absolutely, yeah. Economy is a very important part of our learning, isn't it? What's that course called in Oxford, which most of our MPs have done? Is it PPPE, right? Philosophy, Politics and Economics. So it's incredibly important. Okay, so let's move on and be more specific to what is a madrasa. So I like bringing this up because this is something I wrote down 3 years ago. I think it was in October, November, before we started FEC, just as points on what we will do in our madrasa. Now, then after this, I will show you what we've evolved to doing. Okay, but anyway, first thing was we want our madrasa to be. So, by the way, pedagogy. Can anyone tell us what this means? We've heard it a lot.
Is it just a form of learning?
Yeah, form of learning. Okay, good. Anyone add to that?
Teaching children.
Teaching children, but that's just. Oh, sorry. Was that it? Method. Yes. So your method of teaching, that's pedagogy. Okay. So first of all, we wanted it to be an experience-based education which caters for the individual needs of pupils and thrives on their unique learning skills and abilities. So it's not just about catering for special educational needs. It's about not just catering, but taking that forward and making them thrive on that. So if there is a student, for instance, who is not so good academically, usually when it comes to when it comes to GCSEs and things like that, it's going to be tough for them because you have to be able to write, you have to be able to read in a certain way, be able to analyze text in a certain way, and it's very, very academic. And those who can't do that, they do the other thing. What is it called? The more of the business kind of thing. BTEC, yes. And is that kind of frowned upon in the school world?
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Behind someone.
Yeah. So that's a very unfortunate state, I think, because not everyone is going to be academic. Actually, very few of us are academic, but more of us as humans or as Homo sapiens, we are more kinesthetic. We're more practical beings. We do things more. So, unfortunately, the world we live in now, it's kind of changed around quite a bit. And what we're trying to say, so for example, we had a student in our madrasa, we still have a student, and she is dyslexic. So I remember in when we did our Prophets project, and the reason why we keep it extremely open and give students a chance is for them to explore themselves and be able to, through their own skills, be able to explore the life of Prophet ﷺ. So we had one student who, during the Prophets project, she sang a song about the Prophet ﷺ. She did really well, and because she was dyslexic, academically she doesn't do so well. So we, based on this, and the reason why I'm trying to do this, I want then teachers to be able to do that, okay? To find those students and try and ensure that they excel in those skill sets that they have. So what we did, we spoke to her parents and said, look, we'll hire a local music studio for her to record professionally. And I think that boosted her confidence quite a bit, to the extent when she came to us the following year and said, look, can I volunteer for you guys on Saturday? Now children don't really do that kind of stuff, but she was willing to do that because she was given that confidence. And this is where, and we'll talk about this later on, where madrasas come into it. Why madrasas now is crucial that we play a bigger role in the life, and bigger positive role in the life of children. Okay? Because ultimately they have a choice. They have the secular life, okay? And then they have a life of faith and of their religion and their culture. And we have to kind of sell this idea to them now. Okay? And and this used to happen, I feel, in some way at the time of Prophet ﷺ as well, because the deen has been called a tijara. That metaphor has been used for Islam in many ways, even in the Quran. هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم. Okay? That's one thing. Secondly, even one of the parts of the sadaqahs, which Mufti can expand on, is, one of the things is to set aside money for those who are almost at the border of Islam. They're willing to come into Islam. So can you see how Islam is being sold to them, it's being presented in this positive way? And I think madrasas need to go on to that as well. Second point, we need to have a holistic kind of method. Now, which encourages active, independent learning, and the teacher takes the place of a facilitator and guide. Now, this is an interesting notion. Okay? So, by holistic, who can tell us what we mean by holistic? Who can, remember, don't worry about if you get it wrong or anything like that. Yes?
Taking loads of different things into consideration. And
Good. Okay, yeah, so taking lots of things, putting them in. So, for instance, I'm going to ask you a question on this. So, do you think, would you say that if we're teaching fiqh one week and then aqidah another week and history another week, do you think that's holistic?
No, I think it all needs to be incorporated into one lesson.
Okay.
So the way you're teaching fiqh needs to incorporate aqidah and sirah.
And you can have history somewhere in there as well. Somewhat of the Swedish method of, not Swedish. What's that country called? Sorry? Finnish, yes, the Finnish model of teaching. So in Finland, they've somewhat, and I think, some articles have said they've fully got rid of subjects. Okay? But I don't think it's fully done in that way. It's very tough to do that. Okay? Because it takes a lot of facilitation from the teachers. You've got to basically set the grounds. Once you've set the grounds, you put out the structure, then it's all down to the students. Right? So in Finland, in many places, when they do projects, they will set a project where they'll need maths, they'll need geography, they'll need computer, they need to know how to create websites, they need to do so many different things. Okay? And not only that, let's talk about the whole concept of guide. So we're going back to, in madrasas, when they talk about mantiq. Okay? So there's two types of hidayah, two types of guidance. So one is, so if you're outside on the streets and you're lost, okay, and you are looking for someone to give you that guidance, that direction to a certain destination, so that for that person, there's two ways of doing that. Okay? For that guide, there's two ways of them to guide you. One is al-isal ila al-matlub, as it's called. That they'll hold you by the hand or say, look, I'm going in that direction. Anyway, you can sit in my car and I'll take you there. And you're talking on the way, and then it takes you around different streets, and you get to your destination. Okay, that's one example. The second is what is termed as ira'atul tariq, to kind of show you the way, to give you directions to the way, and then you got to listen very carefully, and then you've got to find your own way. Now, let's have a 60-second discussion on which way do you think, which type of guidance is better? Is it the first type where you're taken by the hand and you reach a destination, or the second type where you're given directions? And you've got to tell me why you think either one is better. 60 seconds. This is going to be real 60 seconds, not the FEC one. The time starts now. So you've got about 30 seconds left. Okay, 15 seconds. Oh, absolutely, we've got lots of time. Oh, actually, if you could sign up, because I'm going to stay there in December. So all this will be, but we'll do that here. Is that right?
I was only joking, did you?
What's that about?
About signing something.
Oh. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so we'll take the names out of the pot again. Okay, oh, Usada Asma. If you can tell us which one is better and why.
So generally, I think the second one is better.
Which one was the second one?
The second one is if you give the person directions.
Directions, okay.
And then you just let them get on with it.
Good.
Because obviously you're making them independent.
Yep.
But there may be some cases where that person needs a bit more help, so you could just maybe take them like halfway or something.
Okay, interesting. Good point. Okay, I'll look. Can we get Sheikh Hossam? Which one's better and why?
I think it depends on the person.
Which person? The guide or the person who's lost?
The person is being guided.
Oh, yeah, the lost one.
I think overall the second one would be better because if he takes the first method, that's just solving him in that situation alone. Whereas if he takes that second method, that will be solving his situations for future situations to come.
Interesting, yeah. Excellent. Ustad Daniel, could you add to that, please? To what Sheikh Hussam said? Or would you agree or disagree with that?
No, agreed that the second method is better. The first method, an issue with that is that if that person was to die or not be there, then that person wouldn't necessarily get to that destination. And what we were discussing that the second method, you're teaching them to be the guider as opposed to just the guided.
There's an interesting thing that came to mind. So you know the verse of the Quran, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ, where Prophet ﷺ was told, because he was so passionate about ensuring that everyone, from his family, etc., accepted Islam, but he had a few uncles who didn't, and he was told that you cannot guide everyone who you love. So what does guidance mean here? Which one is it? Is it the directions or taking them to the destination? Taking them to the destination. Yeah. So can you see the difference in that? However, we'll come back to the education side of it. And again, if that person got lost again at the same place, now he will be in need of another guide because he hasn't been told the direction. He hasn't had to think much. They're probably talking on the way, and he didn't look at which streets they were turning into, and he will be stuck again in that position. So similarly, when it comes to teaching, we are taking the facilitator route. This is something that they're also talking about quite a bit when it comes to university. Okay, so if you were to do a PGCE, this is something that they're talking about a lot. And I can still remember the very first lecture, the very first, I think, sentence that the teacher said was that, and obviously he brought Ofsted into it, and he said, look, Ofsted are not willing to see or wanting to see how good teaching is going on, but what they are actually looking for is whether there is good learning taking place. Okay? And there was a funny example from one of the nursery classes where Usada Zahida said this, so Usada Zahida Ahmed, she said that they did a really cool lesson, so teaching was really good and great, where they had to make like a well for Yusuf al-Islam story.
Purest ingredients.
Oh,
We bring
interesting.
You the best blend of Italian and Indian
She's looking at now.
That's fantastic. Is that so that's what you'll be guessing each other for those of you. Okay. No, it's okay. That happens. So, Ustad Hussam, is that part of the meal deal, do you think? Will that be good enough, Sheikh? Okay. So, where were we?
The nursery class.
Yeah, so nursery, yeah. So they did the well for Yusuf Islam. They had fun, like putting that together, pasting it, gluing it, cutting it. And then I think right at the end of the lesson, as part of the plenary, which we will discuss what that is as well towards the end, she asked one of the students, so who was Prophet Yusuf Islam? And the child was like, I don't know. Right? So it's not just about the arts and crafts. This is something we have to really understand. It's not just about, learning is not just about cutting pieces of paper and just gluing them elsewhere in your book. Okay? It is about, it's only good if it has that learning element to it. Okay? It's only good if we're constantly, as they're cutting and writing, constantly asking them, okay, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? There's a piece of paper I think I've given out. Have I given it? Yes. It's called Spit It Out. Okay. We will do that at some point as well. So it's important that if we are doing arts and crafts, for example, that we constantly go to them and ask them what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, okay? Why it's important. Constantly. So that's what the teaching assistant's role will be. So the structure's been set and laid out. So now it's about asking, okay, what are you doing? Constantly just going around. And because we have 3 members of staff, it's even easier. Even if you take, just say, 2 tables each, okay, say up to 8 students each, it's very easy to go around and do that with 8 students. Okay? As opposed to what's expected in schools where you have 1 teacher and 30 students. Okay? Some classes have 33, 4, 5 now. Okay? It's gone up. Okay, so that's the holistic method. So for example, one example of the holistic method is when we use the mud, okay, the wudu session. So that's when we really did quite well. When we got wudu as a concept, and we played around with it and we brought all these other things, other topics within it. So for instance, we were able to do fiqh with that practical lesson, look at the inner self, the outer part of wudu, and then talk about protecting the environment, at the same time trying to help others who don't have water, historically looking at Prophet ﷺ, the actual mud itself, what he said about wasting water, etc. We were able to bring fiqh into that, history into that, so many things into that one topic. Now I won't expand on that too much because we've done it in practice. With the other madrasas, we usually give them these examples and say this is what we've done. Third thing, one which works towards keeping the hearts and minds of Muslim children open for Islam and the maktab after they leave the maktab. Again, for some of us who think, what is maktab? That's just another term that's used for the after-school madrasa. Okay, so why have we added this? There's 2 things. I remember I was once I was ill and I was late getting back to Dewsbury in Yorkshire for the madrasa. So I had to take a train, and in Leeds I had to take a taxi to Dewsbury. Now that taxi, I sat down at the back behind the driver and had this really big book. It was the 6 books of hadith in one, right? So it's quite large. And as I sat down, the guy, he started doing tawaf around the car, constantly started just going round and round, and he was sweating. And then I stopped him and I asked him, what's happened? And after a while, once he got a bit more comfortable, and he explained that whenever he sees someone with a beard and books, right, he kind of goes into panic mode because he was abused in his madrasa. Okay, so it's incredibly important for us to ensure that every single child that leaves the madrasa, his heart or her heart and mind is open for Islam. Okay, they have the love of the Prophet and love of Allah in their heart. That's one thing. Secondly, we have, and we spoke about this in one of our meetings. I think this year, at some point this year. We spoke about ex-Muslims, and when we tried to invite one of these famous ex-Muslims, we almost did it, and she was supposed to come to one of our teachers' meetings to talk about why she left Islam. She's still an ex-Muslim, and the idea behind that would have been for us teachers to have a better idea of what is happening to these students, what are they going through, and we can try and avoid a lot of the things that these kids have to face. And then we spoke about the concept of those ex-Muslims who have come out as ex-Muslims. But then there's a larger number who are the in-closet ex-Muslims. I remember we gave an article out for that as well. Now, it's incredibly important for us to realize, especially I think even in Cobalt, that there would be students who are teenagers, they've studied, for example, evolution, for instance. Even at Kelmscott, I remember, I was teaching history at one point, and there was this child who used to come to the mosque all the time. He used to lead the Dhuhr prayer at the school, and then lead the Jummah prayer as well, and give the adhan. One day we came and found that he had left Islam, and he came out with it. So what happened was he had studied evolution, for instance, and his science teacher, who was an ex-Jew, right, he took him to the Natural History Museum and really made him confused about his religion. His madrasa couldn't really help, okay, because teachers were not trained in that. So we did have a chat at some point later on where we said, look, and not only that, there's Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, which plays a massive role in this as well. So, and this is what I used to do in RE. Look, this is Richard Dawkins' book. Okay, here are about 20 books that have refuted his argument. What tends to happen is students come across Richard Dawkins' book or those ideas, they don't have access to about those 20 books, and they don't understand how to respond to that. But there are humans have always argued. Humans have always disagreed since the beginning of time till now. There are some things we're never going to agree upon. Even the fact that whether can we prove that God exists intellectually just through reason? Is that even possible? Do we have to do that? That's another question. If we can prove God through complete reason, then is there a question of faith? And what is faith if you can understand God? Yeah? And I think this is what the Quran talks about. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those who believe in the unseen. Okay? And I think it is referring to it. That's where faith does come into the question. Anyway, so coming back to the fourth point. And third point, so for instance, keeping the hearts and minds, keeping children happy, okay, and not pressurizing them, stressing them. One of the things, so the whole concept of exams. Now, I've said this in so many madrasas now, and we've totally, because we have the chance to make these changes, we totally finished off exams, okay, because of the stress that they cause. And not only that, it's irrelevant in a madrasa, because what are they going to do with those exam results? If you look in so many mosques, it's like the end of year happens, it's just a tradition. End of year exams take place, they get numbers which are very subjective, okay? And then after the numbers are given to them, they get like reward for first, second, third, and then those papers disappear, nothing happens. Okay? There's no kind of result that's coming out. This is our opinion, this is where we're coming from. And I personally feel that we took this from our colonial masters in the past, when the British came over to India, Pakistan, or at that time India. This exam was something that we took on. It's not part of the Muslim tradition. It's never been a part of the Muslim tradition. Yes, we've had other forms of assessment, if we can call it that, through isnad. And especially and again, that's where the sacredness of knowledge was there, where a teacher had that close connection with a child or a student, that he was able to, observe them, give them that experience of what we call suhbah. And I think that's incredibly important, that aspect of learning and education. And that's why the Sahaba, they're called the Sahaba, because they had that experience with the Prophet. It comes from the word suhbah. So coming back to this point, that after the teacher spent that time with the student in Muslim tradition, they would ultimately say, look, I've seen your work, I've seen your understanding of the faith, or whichever book that they studied. Now you have permission, okay? They were given ijazah to now pass that on to others. That was the, what we call exam in the Muslim world. And what I find interesting is when it came to the scholars of Deoband, that they did say, they kind of said at that point that look, they were totally against the colonizers. So they said, no, we're not even going to learn the language of the colonizers. Okay? And you can kind of understand that frustration and that anger that they were facing, because you walk out of your house, you get spat on by someone from the army, or some of their soldiers, or not just soldiers, lieutenants or whatever. And they constantly have that hate towards the colonizer. However, when we did open our institutes, exams was one of the things that we just kind of took. And that's why there were scholars like, remember Mawlana Shaykh Ali Tanwi, for instance, rahimahullah, who did not do the exam. He did not have an exam. What he used to do was he used to bring the student to the front, give them the book itself, ask them a question, and say, okay, find the answer and respond to it. Because that was relevant to them. Because that's what those graduates were going to do in the future. Okay, it's not like someone was going to come to them and they have to give an answer on the spot. Okay, by doing lots of research that would happen anyway. However, if they didn't, that's the method going forward. However, coming back to the point, the last thing, which we've kind of spoken about, is the curriculum should be made relevant to students of the modern age. So that's incredibly important. So that's why, for instance, we spoke about Isa alayhi salam, and we stressed that last week, because there were, in nursery classes, quite a few students who actually thought, because of the nativity plays and stuff, and it had really taken hold in their minds that Isa alayhi salam is the son of God. So a lot of them were saying that. And quite a few parents ask me, so, are you going to talk about this? And what we do is every Christmas we do have a lesson on Isa alayhi salam. And every Easter we have a lesson on his, the whole death aspect or crucifixion. So it's got to be relevant. And not just that, for example, we need to teach and speak about evolution. Okay? And hopefully we're going to invite Sheikh Uthman to talk about that at some point as well, because he's done quite a lot of research into that. So teachers will not all the teachers will know how to deal with a topic like evolution. So we'll need to get the experts to talk to teachers first and then to pass that on. Okay? So inshallah we will be doing that. And if we don't talk to them about it in this safe environment, then people outside will, and that's when they will be confused and they will not know who to turn to. Okay? Because they've been so used to the Isal ibn Makhluk taking them to the destination. Okay, so that's why we started off, and I think it's important every time we do a training to refresh sometimes where we're coming from and why we are doing certain things in certain ways. Okay, so we ultimately came up with our statement. We may need to improve on this. It's all one sentence, which Ali and Naqvi pointed out in one of the open days. That's such a big sentence. She couldn't come off that point. So we are an academy which specialises in facilitating the cultural, experiential, conscientious, critical and creative growth of children through to their later teens by means of a holistic pedagogy infused with a synthesizing of traditional and contemporary ideas in order for them to have a well-rounded Islamic world view. Okay? So we're doing a lot of that now. So even with the synthesizing of the traditional and contemporary, a lot of that is mixed up anyway. Okay? It does. Sometimes we think, oh, that's an old thing, or that's a very new thing. But it's all already been spoken about before. So for example, this whole concept of learning through play. Imam Ghazali actually spoke about this 900 years ago, 900 years plus years ago. Okay? And he spoke about how children should not be in school for the first 7 years of their life. They should just play. Because that's where they learn. Okay? That's how they learn. I mean, babies, they don't go to a school. They learn through their taste, they learn through their sense, their touching, feeling, exploring. That is where real learning takes place. So what to us may seem like a modern or contemporary idea has been expounded upon by our scholars in the traditional idea. Okay, so I'm going to try and finish off as quickly as possible. I'm going to rush through this bit. Anyone heard of Ibn Khaldun? Oh, you just heard the name? Ibn Khaldun.
Historian.
Yeah, he was a historian, yes. Anyone else want to? Ibn Khaldun. Okay.
His introduction is more famous than his actual book, right?
Sorry?
His introduction is more famous than his actual
Yes,
book.
the Muqaddimah, yes, absolutely. Yes. And the introduction is very big itself. Okay? It's a whole book in itself. So this is called the Muqaddimah. And it's a very interesting book. Okay? It's you can get this online as well as a PDF form. But do have a read through of this, even just the front. I think the first bit, the first chapter, and you can get so much from it, from his book itself. So Ibn Khaldun, he was born in Tunisia, I believe. He was born in Tunisia, and he is known as kind of one of the forefathers of psychology, sociology. He was an impressive historian. Okay. And what he did was he went to so many different, he went to so many different empires amongst the Muslim world, and he wrote this kind of book of history. But his focus, whilst he was writing it, was how do nations rise and how do they fall? Okay? How did the Muslim empires rise and where were they fall? And Iqbal kind of summarized that in one poem. Okay? I won't say the Urdu because Ustad Hussam will be confused. So what I'll do, I'll just translate it, which was that let me tell you the rise and fall of nations. Okay. Iqbal says, let me tell you the story of the rise. That's the first sentence of the rise and fall of nations. Nations rise in the shadow of the swords, meaning through struggle, through strife, through living a difficult life, and they fall in the ashes or in the shadows of musical instruments, in luxuries, where there's too much peace. And he's talking about the Arab Bedouins, that they got to the top because of all the struggle in the deserts that they made, and the harsh and difficult life that they lived. And they say that that God lies behind the mountain of sacrifice. Whoever wants can go and find him there. Okay? Not literally, metaphorically. Yeah? And then what he says is that when they became urbanized, they went to urban centers after they'd left the deserts, and they made their palaces and went into luxury. That was the kind of fall. So during his research and his exploration, or his anthropological field work, if you want to call it that, he also examined madrasas. Okay? He examined the madrasas at the time in Andalus in Spain, in Morocco, in Tunisia, and the East. Okay? And what we'll do, so what happened was, I actually had to read the whole chapter, and I summarized it in 4 PowerPoints. Okay? And we'll do that very quickly, because we're running out of time. So, give you an idea, that's Andalus, so that used to be Muslim. During Ibn Khaldun's time, that's when Muslims were kind of thrown out of Spain. And it's very interesting on how that affected the madrasas at the time. What kind of change that brought was very, very interesting. Then you have Al-Maghrib, okay, you have Morocco. And then you have Ifriqiya, which is like Tunisia, Algeria. And then you have the east further east on that side. So he talks about these 4. Okay? So he summarizes them. So the reason why I want to talk about this is because it's incredibly important that we are now, the question is, what is a madrasa? Okay? So we have to look at history and find out where we're coming from and where we are now. Okay? And how we have come about. And most of the madrasas around here, why are they the way they are? Okay? I had a friend who said to me once that whenever I walk into a mosque, maktab, it feels like he's walked into like a piece of India or Pakistan. And then he walks back out and he's back in London again. Right? So there's a lot of like copying and pasting going on. And we're going to talk about the history to see what's happening today and why it's happening. Okay? So, let's talk about Al-Andalus. By the looks of it, and through his Muqaddimah, you can see that he was very impressed with Al-Andalus. Okay? So Ibn Khaldun was impressed. I gather some of his teachers were also from there. So, okay, let me go back for a second. Oh, person. Jazakallah. So, instruction in reading and writing. So in the madrasa, they were taught how to read and write as well. Now, just to contextualize, they were speaking Arabic anyway, they understood Arabic, so for them reading and writing wasn't much of a problem. However, since the Quran is the basis and foundation of all that, and the source of Islam and the sciences, they make it the basis of instruction, but they do not restrict their instruction to it. This is interesting because you'll find out what the Moroccans were doing at that time, as opposed to this. Okay? So, they teach reading and writing. The Quran is at the epicenter. However, if alongside the Quran they are doing other things, okay? They also teach poetry alongside that, okay? Composition, expert knowledge of Arabic, and good handwriting. Because when he talks about the East, he very clearly talks about how bad handwriting they had over in India and stuff like that. Okay? And they do not stress the teaching of the Quran more than any other subject. And in fact, they are more concerned with teaching handwriting than any other subject. I want to come back to and ask why that might have been. Why that might have been the case in Andalus and not so much in Morocco, for instance. Okay? So let's look at Al-Maghrib, so what we potentially call Morocco today. They restrict the education of children to instruction in the Quran. Now that does not mean that they only study the Quran. They did do other subjects, but when it's restricted, what Ibn Khaldun is talking about is, so the Maghribis do not bring up any other subjects in their classes. Isn't that interesting? So there's Spain, Morocco is just underneath. In Spain, they're pretty open to everything. They're giving them this holistic kind of education. Whereas in Morocco, it's restricted to the Quran. No other subject is brought into the classroom until they're able to read the Quran. Only then they're allowed to write. Only then they're allowed to have good handwriting, practice the handwriting, calligraphy, as we call it. Okay? Only then that's allowed. So, if you had dyslexia, that was it at that time. So you would not be able to read the Quran, therefore you would have to just do BTEC 700 years ago. That's what would have happened. Okay? As such, traditions, jurisprudence like fiqh, poetry and Arabic, philology, sarf and all that were not taught until the pupil is skilled in the Quran. Isn't that interesting? So in Spain you have everything going on. In Morocco it's just the Quran up until you learn until you've mastered it. They use it also with old people who study the Quran after part of their life has passed. Why do you think they did that? Why were old people? Because some of them, for their whole life, can possibly read the Quran, and later on in their life they thought, you know what, all my life has passed. They probably had a 40 days Jamaat that came to them 700 years ago, and they then realized that this is not the case, and so then they would try and go back to the Quran. Okay. Oh, so that's Morocco. So it's the Quran. Yes, sorry.
When about was in
Sorry.
When did you write
This is at the fall. So going back about 600, 700 years, I believe. Yeah. When Spain is kind of falling and it's on its decline. Yeah. 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 So it's on its decline, and Muslims are having to leave, and we'll find out here as well. Now, the people of Ifriqiya. So this is his own hometown. Okay. He says they combine the instruction of children in the Quran and Hadith. Okay. Quran and Hadith. They also teach basic scientific norms. So they teach science. There are a lot of scientists who have come from Tunisia, from Ifriqiya, and certain scientific problems. Okay? So you would have enjoyed it in Tunisia. So those of us who are into science. They did maths as well, I think. They stress giving their children a good knowledge of the Quran and acquainting them with its various readings more than anything else. Next they stress handwriting. Okay, so I'll cut that off. Next they stress handwriting. So is this closer to Morocco or is it closer to Spain? And who can... I think let's do a 30-second quick discussion on why do you think Ifriqiya, I've hinted it towards it slightly, why do you think Ifriqiya is very similar to Spain, even though it's further away from Spain and literally right next to Morocco? Why is it similar to Spain? I'll give you 30 seconds to discuss. You have 20 seconds left. Okay, 10 seconds. Why do you think he was so opposed to the Moroccans? Usama Hassan, why do you think he was so critical of Moroccans here? Okay, so does anyone have any response? I won't take the pot now. Anyone want to respond to why Ifriqiya was very similar to Spain? Anyone want to? We'll get two answers on that.
Maybe they tried different methods and...
Oh, interesting. So they tried different methods. But that's a good point. That's a good point. But if you could, yeah.
Sorry, I think it was similar to the Maghreb in the sense they had more Quran focus, but then it was similar to Spain in the sense that they were more holistic in terms of studying the Quran because they looked at the sciences of the Quran.
Why do you think that was?
Writing of the Quran, different styles of the Quran.
Why do you think that was?
Is it due to just a guess?
Yeah, of course, yeah. It's all about guessing.
Is it previous migration and teaching people from different regions of the world?
Migration? If you talk a bit more about that.
So I know that historically, I don't know, this is a stab in the dark, but maybe because they were dealing with people of different nations, different traditions.
As in the Tunisians?
As in the Tunisians, yeah. They had to emphasize on the different styles of the Quran.
Yeah,
maybe perhaps.
Yeah, that's pretty close. But to give you another idea, why are Indians and Pakistanis Hanafis?
They're scholars. They should...
But
they're learning from them.
where did they come from? What happened?
Ottoman Empire could only have...
No, but Indians and Pakistanis were Mughals. They were Mughals, they had people like Tipu Sultan from Serengiput, so it's like not really Ottoman. Even though they had like people would come over. But it goes back to the Abbasids, before the Ottomans. So you know when the Mongolians totally destroyed Baghdad, there were many Hanafi scholars there in Baghdad who got their books and they migrated to India, Pakistan, and they spread their knowledge of Hanafi school of thought. That's why, and can you see how war and migration has a huge impact on the way we think today? So we're Hanafi today because of that war and the migration that took place. It has huge impact. just as a way that Muslims are having some form of an impact on this country, okay, in so many ways. Okay. Similarly, when Muslims were being thrown out of Spain, many of the scholars from Spain, they migrated to Ifriqiya, and they brought with them their method of teaching to Tunisia. And he talks about this as well in his Muqaddimah. In general, their method of structure is similar to, closer to the Spanish method than to the Maghribi or Eastern methods, because their education tradition derives from the Spanish sheikhs who crossed over when Christians conquered Spain. Okay. And asked for hospitality in Tunisia, in Tunis. From that time on, they were the teachers of Tunisian children. Interesting, isn't it? On how they then took they copied their system and they pasted it here. So we've done something similar to the madrasas we see around us. Copied them from India, Pakistan, and brought them here. Now, here they're very, very similar. There's one Muslim country to another Muslim country. But can we do that now? That's the question. Can we copy something which was, going on for some time back in India, Pakistan, or Morocco, or any other country, and just paste it here?
No.
Oh, interesting. Why not?
Things to do with people's egos.
Okay.
So it's like a lot of people won't accept it based on the background and the way they were raised and the way they were taught in a specific way.
And also, what about the teaching methods that are there in India? How do they manage behavior in India, Pakistan? What's the behavior management? Beat them up. Yes, absolutely. So that's the mechanism that they have in place. For example, back in India, they don't need to worry because they're in a Muslim country. They will learn about Islam. They won't hate Islam because it's just part of their everything, okay, in all ways of life. Is that the same case here? No, because here it's extremely secular. Okay? They have a choice between Islam and a secular way of life, and when they see all the good in the secular way of life, what happens? They kind of just before I came, when I was printing stuff out, I was listening to a lecture, a live lecture, which was take place in Canada. Someone from Pakistan called Maulana Tariq Jameel, and he was mentioning how if you go to Pakistan, they have these really colourful trucks, and behind the trucks they have all these poems and all these statements and quotes, which are quite funny at times. So one of them, he said, that, I don't know how to put this in English. He said, "My heart is for sale." It was at the back of a massive truck. My heart is for sale, and what is the price? Just one sentence, one sweet sentence to another person. Just say one sweet sentence to me, and you've won my heart. So with children, the kind of difficulty that they're going through, the challenges that they're facing, they don't understand where they're coming from. The identity. That's why history is very important. They need to be told, look, this is the past. This is what happened. You migrated here because of this. This is where you come from. Okay, so identity is incredibly important. So the East, he kind of mostly criticizes. Okay, so we don't need to go into that. So as far as we know, likewise have a mixed curriculum. That's good. Concerned with teaching of the Quran, they do not combine with instruction in handwriting. So it's separate thing. You'll have to get another teacher to learn how to do calligraphy, and also. They have one main thing that came out that is that they have very bad handwriting. Okay, they had very bad handwriting in the East. So can you see how Ibn Khaldun was almost like an Ofsted inspector back in the times, where he looked at all these different methods and modes. So this is some form of history that we're getting from time along. And there's a lot of other history which I haven't really brought up. Okay, for instance, during the Mamluk period. Okay, that's one of the most interesting Muslim periods ever. Okay. I still remember one of our lecturers, he said to us at university that if you want to examine a purely Islamic empire which was not really influenced by the West, look at the Mamluks, other than the Khulafa Rashidin, obviously, Khulafa Rashidun, but the Mamluks. And again, it's very similar to what Imam Ghazali was saying at the time. Oh, Ibn Arabi, anyone heard of him? He has been criticized quite a bit for certain aspects of his theology. However, he was very, very influential during the Seljuk period, okay, just before the Ottomans. And he said, how thoughtless are our people in that they teach children the Quran when they are first starting out. They read things they do not understand and work hard at something that is not as important for them as other matters. It's very interesting. He's saying this to a time when people did know how to read Arabic and understand Arabic, but even then he felt that why is this taking place? Actually, 30 seconds on what do you make of this? I don't just want to lecture and oppress everyone with my ideas. So if I give you 30 seconds, what do you make of this? In pairs you can do that, or in threes or fours. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2. How are you, Sheikh? Yeah. And 1. Are you happy, Sheikh? Okay. Right. So, let's come back to the names. They don't move around, I still. It's just part of the effect. Usada Kulthum.
Okay, now. So I just said to Usada and that I think his criticism was that children, when they're learning the Quran, in as much as it's important to read the words per se, his focus was more on what is the meaning of La ilaha illallah than to read La ilaha illallah. What's the meaning of Allah is one?
Okay.
That's what he was trying to get at.
The deeper meaning behind it, what was relevant for them. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Ustad Adil, if you can.
I find it very difficult. I don't know. Can I get some assistance?
Phone a friend.
We agree and disagree.
Okay,
you can say.
What do you disagree about in his text?
Well, I made the point that
I don't know if it's too valid, but
no.
It doesn't matter. In part of discussion, it doesn't matter. I mean, something being valid or not valid is very subjective. So it's your opinion.
I think it's very difficult to understand the Quran when you're young.
Okay.
So I think you should start the practice of reciting the Quran, regardless of whether you understand it or not. Because trying to understand the Quran could take many years. It's a science, it's complex.
And on that point, going back to their context, a lot of the children, they spoke Arabic at that time as well. So they would have known how to read it, but I think he's referring directly to the understanding. So reading, they were able to read, most likely. They probably just studied the tajweed aspect to it. But yeah, what do you... Yeah.
Depends on referring to by teaching the Quran, because just reading the Quran on its own without meaning is still an act that you get rewarded for. It's still a great act of ibadah. And the other thing is, though we don't directly engage with the Quran, we use the other sciences to teach the message of the Quran. So we teach the seerah, we teach the fiqh, we teach hadith, etc. Which ultimately still give the message of the Quran but to a different meaning. But where we are guilty, we totally leave the Quran to the
Yes.
and there's no contact at all with the Quran translation.
We go in the other, totally reject the understanding of it.
We get accustomed to just reading it without understanding it, and that's where I agree with that statement.
So we are understanding the Quran, but not through the Quran, it's just through the other sciences. So we can't relate directly to it.
I think mainly that the way it's being taught now, you memorize the Quran, then you move on to learning about hadith and fiqh, about actually learning through the Quran itself.
That's a good point.
They're not going through the actual middle ground.
Yeah, and not only that, so just say out of the 100% students who do go to the madrasa, okay, and they do study the Quran, what percentage do you think actually go to do further studies and do lots of courses?
Yeah.
Do you think it's 1% or 1 or 2%?
Yeah, I wouldn't say 0, 1 or 2%.
1 or 2%.
1 or 2.
Oh yeah, so 1 or 2% who do go on to study further. So what happens to the 98% who've just read the Quran how it is?
It's not teaching like this.
Sorry?
They start teaching at FEC.
Okay. Yeah.
But going back to that, what stood out to me is that it was as if it was backing up Imam Ghazali's point about learning to play.
Yes.
For the early stages. But then, how would you learn the Quran to play? It's a difficult point.
I mean, it's actually very interesting because I was talking to one of our first parents last week about, she's a storyteller. So she's going to come in one of the weeks to do storytelling. Okay, and she was saying that she goes to different schools, and in those different schools, they ask her, okay, do you need a projector? Do you need one of these? What do you need? So he says, no, I need absolutely nothing. I just need myself and the students, and that's it. And it's all about storytelling, and that's why if we notice when it comes to not just the Quran but also other sacred texts, they always have stories. Even when they teach ethics are taught through stories. Okay, so there will be so many ethical points that would be taught through, for example, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Okay, there will be so many ethics taught through the stories of Musa alayhi salam, was mentioned the most in the Quran. So it is about, and if you go back to the time of the companions, everything was oral, isn't it? Everything was memorized. It was oral tradition. It's only now that we have everything else, and that's why. And there's a professor who used to say, like if you go to a theatre, you need the building first of all. You need the type of stage, the curtains, the seats, and so much background to it. So much is taking place, and then you have the actors and the people watching, the audience. He said you can strip everything away. Okay, you can have a theatre without the curtains. You can have theatre without the chairs. You can have theatre without the stage. You can have theatre without the building even. Okay, all you really need, and he said the best kind and type of theatre is when you just have that actor there and you have the audience. That's the best type of theatre, because that actor has to do everything to deliver their point across. And I think the people in Arabia at the time used to do that really well. And we have to not everyone's going to be able to do that nowadays, but that's where we can, when it comes to the Quran and how it was an oral tradition, that's how they did possibly use different ways of, and when we talk about learning through play, we really try and understand that from this context where we are now. They did it in their own way. So I'll kind of summarize or finish off here, and we'll have a very short break. That's okay. Is everyone really tired already? Oh, so Saleh, how are you then? Okay. Okay, so we'll summarize and we'll finish off. And we'll finish off on a point which is incredibly important for us as Muslims. And us as Muslims teaching in madrasas. And coming back to our philosophy at FEC. Okay, and where does it derive a lot of points and things from? We spoke a bit about this right at the start, but we're going to talk about the pedagogy of the oppressed now. And we're going to finish on this point. The question is, what pedagogy and philosophy are we to adapt or rather create? So are we going to say, okay, you know what, the Andalusian method sounds pretty holistic, let's just copy and paste that here. Is that going to work? Okay. Or actually, you know what, we just want to open 1,000 madrasas, so let's just apply the Moroccan method because it's easier to implement. So what is our epistemology? What is education? Okay. So, I've already mentioned this about, and that's a quote of Imam Ghazali, you have that there, that, children should not go to school for the first 7 years, they should learn through play. Okay? Prevention of the child from playing games deadens their heart. They sometimes become depressed and they don't want to always go and learn. Okay? When they come back from school, after school, I remember nowadays the only form of entertainment you had was cartoons. Okay? And we only had like 4 or 5 channels on TV. Usadil, were you around in those times? No? Okay, so it was just, there was no internet. There wasn't any, I don't know if Sky was there or not, but we had about 5 channels, that was it. And on one of them there was cartoons. And you could only watch about, I think 30% of that, then you had to run off to mosque. So that was a very traumatic experience for many Muslim students at the time. So, yeah. So again, talking about the Persians, so it's not just Imam Ghazali, but it's throughout the Muslim world. It's very similar. Children must be playfully coaxed into acquiring knowledge and understanding. So again, the understanding of play. I actually got a lot of these points from someone who was with me on our master's course, and what she did was she's doing her PhD on Muslim or children's education in the Mamluk period. Okay. So I have got her master's thesis, which I haven't read too much of, but I've read a few points and I'm taking this out. If anyone's interested, I'm going to try and find it on my laptop. And then here's a Mamluk scholar, Al-Abdari, who was after Imam Ghazali. If people is kept from play and forced into work, and you see, it's not just one Muslim scholar saying it, there's quite a few of them. And the reason why I brought these three is they're from different parts of the Muslim world. Okay, so they didn't really have interaction with each other. They're coming from the Muslim tradition. Okay, now this is our interesting part, which is part of the whole concept of pedagogy of the person. We will finish after this, inshallah. So, when we look back, and I'll explain why this has to be ingrained in our philosophy. When you look back in history at any time, there's always what you call the oppressor, or according to the Prophet's term, the zalim, and you always have the madhulum, the oppressed. Okay? Now, both of these, what I feel when it comes to prophethood and prophets, okay, and their educational pedagogy, their idea and their method and everything evolves around the philosophy of breaking both circles. Okay? So they have to try and bring them together. Okay? And Prophet ﷺ, there is this hadith where he stated that when you see someone oppressing, so when you see a zalim and a madhloom, you help them both. Okay? You help the zalim and the madhloom. So the companion said, we understand the idea of helping someone who's being oppressed, someone who's being bullied, but how do we help someone who is the oppressor, the bully? And Prophet ﷺ said, you stop their hand. Okay? You stop them from their oppression. And part of the role of that was to make them realize that they are the oppressor. Okay? And this is one of the reasons why Prophet ﷺ, he used different methods. The famous incident, which is also partially mentioned in the Quran, where he had invited many of the oppressors or the leaders of Mecca into his house and had a feast with them in order to speak to them about oppression and what they were doing wrong in Mecca. So every time you look back, you look at the time Musa alayhi salam, you'll always have the concept of the oppressor there and the oppressed. Prophets are sent to destroy both of these. Okay? So you cannot remain as a madhloom. You cannot remain as an oppressed individual or a nation. You have to fight yourself out of that. And similarly, you cannot remain a zalim. You have to fight your way out of that as well. You've got to understand. One example I give is what happened following the Holocaust. Okay, so during the Holocaust, the Banu Israel, okay, the Jews, they were madhloom, okay, very madhloom. However, and this is the point, that you have to finish both. You can't come out of one circle and then join the other circle, become the zalim. And what we see happening with not all the Jews, but a certain number of Jews in Israel. So they left one circle, they fought their way out of that, and they joined the other circle. If you look, so just to give an example, the time Musa alayhi salam, the zalim was Pharaoh and his people, and the army at the time. And on the other side, you had Musa alayhi salam and Banu Israel. Okay. Now, what I find really interesting when I'm looking back at some of these stories and have this in mind is when Musa alayhi salam took the Banu Israel. Now this is where education comes into it. When he took Banu Israel and they ran away from the oppressor, they had a dead end, isn't it? They got to the Red Sea. What did the Banu Israel say at that point when they got to the the Red Sea? Who can remind us what the Banu Israel said? We were better off with the Pharaoh. Why? Because they didn't fully conceptualize and understand that you cannot remain oppressed. That is not a state, a normal state to remain in. You have to go in opposition of that. You have to fight your way out of that. And I don't think they fully comprehended that. Okay? A lot of them did, but a lot of them didn't. And that's why some of their quotes are now mentioned in the Quran, that they didn't really fully understand what Musa alayhi salam was doing. Okay? And that's why it's important for us to analyze ourselves. Whichever country, state or place we are we the zalim or are we the madlum? Okay. This is a very simplistic way of looking at it, and it can become very complex, that we could be zalim at sometimes, we can be madlum at sometimes. So yes.
You mentioned the point that before the Bani Israel were allowed to enter Bayt al-Muqaddas, they had spent 40 years in that valley, isn't it? And some scholars say that the reason for that is for them to realize their value now.
Absolutely.
Forget that they're slaves.
Absolutely.
Realize.
And that's part of the education and the philosophy that was taking place.
Bayt al-Muqaddas must have appreciated that fact.
Absolutely, absolutely. And without this realization, you won't appreciate where you're going. Okay? And maybe that should have happened when, after the Holocaust, they, instead of going straight to Israel, they should have gone around for 40 years, Jeff. What do you think? Okay. Anyway, but coming back to during the time of Isa alayhi salam, the oppressors were the Romans. They had colonized, Jerusalem and that part of the world, and also the Pharisees. Anyone know these interesting people? Pharisees. Anyone know them? Sorry?
Heard of him.
Oh, you've heard. So the Pharisees were the priests, the Jewish priests at the time. Okay? They are the ones who Isa was always fighting against. They were the ones where, which is also mentioned in the New Testament, that he went into the temple, what's Bayt al-Maqdis today, and they were like bankers there and people, dealing within the compound, and he went and he, threw the tables on the floor. He was ultimately fighting the Pharisees at that, and those Jewish priests at the time, they were like very, very into the external side of practice. So they did not take on the spiritual side. Okay, so they were just lawyers basically. And Isa alayhi salam was also sent to bring that spirit back into faith. And on the other side, you had the Isa alayhi salam, and you had the general Jews. Okay, now again, and again, like I said, this is very simplistic. Just to explain, there was so much going on in Jerusalem at the time. There was a revolution taking place. Okay, and there were these Jews who were saying, "Look, we're going to fight these Romans." So they were using that kind of method of doing that. There's actually a book written by a Muslim on Isa alayhi salam, and he's written it on the side. He's portrayed Isa alayhi salam as a rebel, as a revolutionary who was actually very, very hot-headed. Okay, and that's why the Romans weren't so happy with him as well. And this is why the temple was destroyed. Okay, the second temple, which Jews believe stood right where the Dome of the Rock is today. Because those revolutionaries, they ultimately went and fought against the Romans. That revolution got crushed, and then the Romans wanted to set an example, and they went into the compound of Bayt al-Maqdis, and there was gold on their temple, and this dua that Isa alayhi salam makes, is in the New Testament as well, that your temple will be broken brick by brick. Because the Pharisees were just about worship, just about the external side of worship, he said that your temple will be broken brick by brick. And it so happened that they set fire to the temple, and the gold kind of melted into the bricks. So they had to break each brick. Okay? They had to break each brick to get to that gold. So that's just the way of looking at the whole concept of oppressor and oppressed. And then coming to the time of Prophet ﷺ, you had the rulers of Mecca, the people who were ruling in Mecca, they were the oppressors. And then you had Prophet ﷺ and the poor of Mecca, and those who were accepting Islam, but generally the poor. We had some rich as well. And ultimately, what happened was, he gave Muslims that freedom. He gave the people that freedom from oppression. And he did not go onto the side of the oppressor. Does anyone know where we have evidence for him getting rid of? He got rid of oppression, but did he become an oppressor? Does anyone know of any evidence that we might have which clearly points towards him not being an oppressor? Yeah. Oh, Sadazahid is something.
The conquest of Mecca?
Yes, very good, excellent. So when Prophet ﷺ came back to Mecca, he had all the authority in the world. He could have done anything. Okay, he could have gone and he could have done stuff which could have been, termed as just. He could have gone to Abu Sufyan, sorted him out. Hind, what did Hind do? She did so much wrong prior to Islam. So he could have done that, but he decided to forgive. And that's where he crushed the whole circle of dhulm, and he leveled it out. Okay. However, it's the reason why so many prophets are constantly set is an example for us that this fight and this destruction of both circles will continue till the Day of Judgment. It's always going to happen. We have to fight this in different ways. So education for us as Muslims is a sense the work of prophethood. Yeah? It's a work of prophethood. And when we are in our madrasas, we've got to understand that this is what we're setting out to do. It's not just about, okay, child comes, let's teach them two lines and make them sit for a certain amount of time and send them home. There's so much at stake when we look at it in this particular way. Okay? And to lastly say that when Prophet ﷺ, okay, I'll mention this and then we'll come to a close. Based on this theory, there's two types of education. Okay? One is that education is used as an instrument to facilitate the integration of students, okay, into the logic of the present system, to conform to it. So the education that was taking place in the time of Pharaoh ensured that the Banu Israel remained as slaves. Okay? They fit into that system. Anyone who came from out of that system and tried to break that was seen as an enemy, like Musa al-Islam. Okay? He tried to make them realize. On the other hand, you have the practice of freedom. That's the second type of education. Now, the practice of freedom is interesting because I'll quote you what a companion once said. The practice of freedom, where you deal critically and creatively with the reality, so not just critically, but creatively and respectfully, and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world. So this is the other side of education. And the practice of freedom, when Prophet ﷺ came, the oppressed and oppressed notion was there. He destroyed that over the period of 23 years. And then when the companions went further to destroy that, because remember, this thing is spread throughout the whole world. And the companions did go to Persia. And when they entered Persia, there was Yazdegerd, who was the last standing general of the Persian Empire at the time, the Sassanian Empire. And he said to the companion, who was one of the poorest companions, his horse didn't even have a saddle, he had like a broken sword. I remember when I was at university, our professors were saying that a lot of these descriptions are definitely true because there is no steel as a resource in Arabia. You don't find that in the deserts. That usually came from the Byzantine Empire, so there's very less of it. And this companion, when he was told, "Look, why have you come here? Go back to the deserts. If you need gold, we'll give you gold. Whatever you want, we'll give you." And it was interesting what he said. He said, "No." The companion said, "Inna Allah ibta'athana," that Allah has sent us. Why? لِنُخْرِجَ الْعِبَادِ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ الْعِبَادِ إِلَى عِبَادَةِ رَبِّ الْعِبَادِ. We have been sent to take out the people, the oppressed people, from the worship of people towards the worship of the Lord of the people. مِنْ جَوْرِ الْأَدْيَانِ إِلَى عَدْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ. To take people away from falsehood of other religions towards the justice of Islam. مِنْ ضِيقِ الدُّنْيَا إِلَى سَعَتِهَا. From the narrowness of this world towards its vastness. So can you see that the practice of freedom being instilled within the companions, and them going ahead trying to crush all this, the notion of oppressor and the oppressed at the time of, after the Prophet ﷺ had passed away. So they passed their exams, they were successful, and they've kind of set the burden on us. And we need to now rethink madrasas. This is what Iqbal says. What it says is that, and this was a message in India when people are again colonized by the British, and he was giving this message to the people that free your mind from slavery. Free your mind from slavery, from oppression, and ensure that the youngsters, this is where the madrasa idea comes from it, ensure that the youngsters become the teachers of the teachers and the preachers. Okay? So this is where our tradition is coming from. I won't talk about the banking concept. Our pedagogy must be prophetic. Okay? We need to go back to the Prophet's pedagogy and see what we can do. And this is a very interesting last point. Does anyone want to read this? Oh, Sheikh Osam, can you try and read this if it's possible? No, it's very similar to Arabic. It'll be a nice little break for us, inshallah. Right, so Iqbal says that make your own space, create your own times, okay? In this world of ishq. By ishq, he's referring to faith and stuff like that. So in this world that we have now, in this complex world, create your own space. Is it just about copying? Is it just about following certain ways? No, it's about creating your own space, create your own time, create your own mornings and your evenings. So this is a very strong message to people that, look, break away from those chains of slavery and oppression and create your own path and way. And then not long after that, Pakistan broke away from India and they were freed from the slavery of the British here. No, that was just a joke, Sheikh Hussain, hopefully. Okay, yeah, so we'll stop here. Should we not have Q&A? We'll possibly have that at some other point, if that's okay. But yes, if you... Well, I wanted Hussam to read that, Sheikh. Okay, so what we'll do, if everyone behaves really well like you've been doing, then I'll do that at the end. Is that okay? No. Okay, cool. Anyone else? Any questions? Any questions? Okay, so should we have a short break? So a lot of this was oppression going on. It was just me constantly talking, even though you were given a bit of chance here and there. But in the next few parts, there will be more interaction from your side, inshallah. And that's where Ustad Danyal will come forward as well for that one. So any questions? Okay, so we should stop there, inshallah. Okay, so we'll have, is 5 or 10 minutes enough? What's 10? Okay, so 1:45. Okay, 1:45 we'll come back, inshallah. Oh, we'll stop this thing. Yes? Oh, yeah, that's fine, absolutely. Okay, so we ready, inshallah? Oh, sorry, what was that? What was that point? There was something, was that pedagogy that you just said?
Oh, pedagogy.
Okay. Right, okay. So should we start, inshallah? So I want to really rush through a lot of this. With madrasas, we go through this very slowly and explain each point. A lot of the classes are already doing most of this. So the questioning bit, I will rush through. Why do we do this whole questioning thing? Because it does lead back to our philosophy of thinking creatively and critically. Okay. Reason being is because our children in modern West, in the secular West, they will have lots of questions that they will be, that will be thrown at them. And they need to understand the whole idea of questioning and how to respond to a lot of this. Okay? Because what tends to happen is anything they hear at school, they will just accept blindly. And just to give an example of, in Enfield, I was covering a lesson. It was A-levels, and it was critical thinking. Okay? And that's the subject. Okay? I didn't know before that there was actually a subject called critical thinking. So I went in and there were I think about 8 of them. And I asked them, so how do you think critically? How do you do critical thinking or studies? So they said, okay, we have this textbook. So we read through about 10 pages and then we answer the questions after that. So that's critical thinking. So I decided to say, okay, let's put the textbooks away. Let me ask you a question. And the question was, so what do you think? And this is like a non-Muslim school. I don't think any of them are Muslim. What's your opinion on homosexuality? So they were, oh, it's all right. And why? So they see the whole thing about being critical. Why? Oh, because it's natural. Why is it natural? Okay. And if something's natural, does it mean it's acceptable? If something's natural, does it mean it's ethical? So all of them said, okay, it's good because it's natural. Okay. So I said, okay, but did you know that currently in universities there's articles being written in journals about paedophilia being natural? So there are articles out there now. The academics are pushing for this. And before I said that, though, I asked them another question. Okay, what's your opinion on paedophilia? So all of them were like, oh, disgusting and all that. So I said, if I asked you about homosexuality 70 years ago, you would have had the same opinion, because by that time academics didn't really, or scientists didn't really talk about homosexuality being a normal thing or natural thing. And if I asked you the same question about paedophilia after another 50 years, possibly by that time it will become, or the concept of it will become that it's natural, and you or your children or your children's children will respond by saying, yeah, it's absolutely natural. So, and that's one thing. Secondly, if science proves something is natural, does it mean a people or a nation have to always agree with that? Okay? Does it mean that now, if in the West you have this concept, And do you have to force that concept in the East? Okay? Is it colonization all over again, but in ethics and in thoughts? And is there such thing as international kind of ethics? So we had a discussion on that. It was about 2 hours we were just talking about that without a textbook. So I think a lot of the learning that takes place, you can just do that with questioning. Okay, and So this is one of the ideas that schools are producing test takers, while businesses need thinkers and innovators. That's the concept amongst businesses and employers now. Question everything. If we don't create that environment in our madrasa classrooms, and we don't create that space environment for our students to question everything around them, then they will be questioned in a non-safe environment for their faith and iman and everything else, and then they will go into the confused category. So we've got to be proactive and ensure that they don't fall into that category. Okay, so learning objectives of this quick session is: what is questioning? Why is it important? When should we question? Where can we question? And who should question or who can question? How to question? So what have I done there? I've used the 5 W's and the how to come up with objectives using questions. Okay? So we're trying to do that. We're trying to be very literal in that sense now. Oh, let's do the who, what, why, when, why, how on this statement. So, the children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in place of exercise. We'll do 60 seconds on the 5 W's. The what, why, when, where, and who. So, what is being said? Okay, what is the message basically? Why do you think someone is saying that? When do you think it was said? Okay. And where do you think it was said? And who do you think that said that statement? Okay. And how? I mean, what was the context? Why do you think they had to say that? So are we ready to do the 5 W's and the how on this small piece of text? So find out. Yeah, so this text. So basically, what is being said? What's the actual message? Okay. Where do you think it was said? When do you think it was said? Who do you think was saying it? Why was it said? Okay, and how was it said? So you got 60 seconds to do that. And remember, you can use these activities in your class as well. Have a little text and put the 5 W's and a H. Someone was clearly not happy. Who said that? Okay. Oh, interesting. I like the way you're analysing the text. Well done to you. Looking for clues. You have 30 seconds. 15 seconds. And I want to know the who as well. Who do you think said this? Who? Who do you think said this? Okay, right. So 5, 4. Can you put your pens down? Can everyone face this way? 3, 2. Oh, can you go back to your seat, please? 2, 1.5. And 1. Well done, Chef. Okay. Right. So let's do quick names out of the pot. So the first one is what is being said. So Sada Sophia, your name has finally come up. What's the message? In your own words. Times are bad. Okay.
So children are a bit lost.
Yes.
They don't have no sense of direction or something. Basically, whatever they're doing is not good.
Okay, so there's misery everywhere. It's all negative. Okay. Okay. So next name on what, where. So Daniel, where do you think it was said?
We discussed it might be possibly maybe a school of some sort.
Okay, a school. Very good. Ustada Asma, can you possibly give us some more wheres? Where do you think it was said?
We didn't actually discuss that before.
Okay.
Where? I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Ustada Kufum, your name has come up. Where do you think it was said?
In any environment where children are. So parents might have said that in an environment where they teach or where they are parenting. Schools, of course, madrasas, universities, even colleges, anywhere where children.
You're trying to make sure that one of them is correct.
Oh no, I'm just giving you the holistic answer.
Okay. Ustad Adil, could you talk about so we've had the what, where, when. When do you think it was said?
After a bad experience.
Oh, okay, that's a good answer. Ustad Hussam, when? Could you give us a different when?
After school.
After school? Okay. That was quite random, isn't it? Mufti, could you give us a non-random where?
We don't know where.
Yeah. Oh no, when?
When? Yes. I think somebody in a high position got a grilling for not doing their job properly.
Oh,
they're
interesting.
turning it around at the students.
Okay, good.
So in a meeting of some sort with staff.
Fantastic. So, and when we're talking about when, can someone else, let's say it was the other Nushina, when do you think this was said? Was it said recently, about 50 years ago, 10 years ago?
I think it runs throughout, like it could have started 50 years ago and it's carried on.
And it's gone worse. Okay, so started 50 years ago and getting worse. Interesting. We'll start as Zahida. Let's do so we've done the what, when, where.
That we've done now.
Oh, we've done where, right? Okay. Who? I like this one. Who do you think said this?
Have you not do you as well?
Have we done it?
Right, that was the first one.
That's why we should write down the
Parents or teachers.
Okay. So any particular figure?
A person in authority.
A person in authority. Okay. This is actually a quote from a person that I've taken and put on here. Can anyone guess who that person might have been?
Mufti Hilal.
Oh, Saturday. Sorry? Oh, Saturday class. Yeah. Okay.
Could fit in quite nicely.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And the other one is, what's the last one? Why? Start another why. Bad experience. Okay. Okay, interesting. Shall I give you the answers for all the... So can you see what we've done there? We've already discussed this. So I've given you this quote. This quote could have been a hadith, it could have been a verse of the Quran, it could have been a picture, it could have been anything. It could have been video. And all you do is you put those 5 W's and a H and say, look, talk about this. And there's no really right wrong answers, in that sense. So the where, someone could have mentioned a continent, could have mentioned a building, could have mentioned, so all of those could be correct. Okay. So this was, the first one is what is being said. We know what's being said. Someone's angry, frustrated. The other one was where. So this was actually in Greece. Okay. It was said in Greece. When? This was about 2,000 years before Isa came. Okay. And who? It was Plato or Socrates. One of them said this. Okay. So it's been about how many years now? 4,000 years. Okay. And we're still at square one, isn't it? Okay. So things haven't changed. And why did he say this? Oh, and the exercise bit, which a lot of people don't know. Why do you think he's mentioned exercise? What was happening in Greece quite a lot? In Athens, where this happened. Yeah, the Olympics. That's where it all came from. They were concerned about people, people's training. It was part of their pedagogy, exercise. So that's why he was very angry that people are, leaving it aside. Similar to when we had Ustada Asma Amla before, who was our girls' PE coordinator, and she was frustrated with girls from even cover class not actually doing any kind of PE, rather sitting down in one place. So she would have really felt this is all the exercise bit. But so that was that. So could you see this discussion that took place? She's using questioning rather than saying, okay, this is what Aristotle or Socrates said, this is what he meant, and instead of lecturing about it, that's what we've kind of covered. At times you have to lecture as well, where there's certain things you can't just do an activity about. Okay, so that was that. So where, when, where, what, why, how. this is what I was referring to, and I've given everyone a copy of this. Okay, everyone should have a copy of this. That your lessons can be as fun and creative as possible, but you've got to constantly, and this is where we have three stuff, to constantly go around and ask students, okay, so why are you doing this? So first of all, what are you doing? Let's just take that example of the girl, or the boy, I can't remember who it was, who did not know after doing a whole piece of crafts about the Prophet Yusuf al-Islam on the well, didn't know who Prophet Yusuf al-Islam was. Okay? Now, had, say, a teacher went up to them and asked, okay, so what are you doing midway? They would have said, I'm just putting paper together in a circular way and putting it down. Then they would have said, okay, so why are you doing that? So what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Either he would have responded, or he said, look, I don't know. And that's where a teacher would have facilitated and helped. Okay? And said, look, actually you're doing this because of this. Okay? And then also, how are you doing it? So this is something that's really, it's something that to really take on board and to go around and question students. And the point of questioning here is to further their learning, make sure they fully understand. Okay? A lot of you are doing things like this, so I'm going to rush through this a bit. Okay? Side note, yes, closed questions, open questions. So we've got to understand some questions that we asked are closed. So where was the Prophet ﷺ born? Some would say Mecca, some would say Arabia, etc. Okay, it's still a closed question where there is one answer. Okay. However, we need to be a bit more open. We need to have a bit more open-ended question. I'll tell you what the table tennis table is for and what the basketball is for. So open-ended questions are some of the questions that we have been asking as well. So for instance, the question that one of the different questions we ask, and the reason for us asking challenging questions is so that when students go to schools and stuff, when they are asked challenging questions, they don't feel confused by them. They're ready to respond, they feel comfortable to respond, and they feel confident as Muslims to respond. So one question, for instance, is why do we need to follow the Quran, which was a book that was read 1400 years ago in Arabia in a small town? Why do we need to follow that book when we have so much advancement now, so much technology, etc., etc.? So that's one of the questions we asked before. I remember Moshe was standing in the back, Imam of Queen's Road Mosque, and he was listening on to this, but he understood where we were coming from. And the idea is, when the children go to schools and they go outside, they're not just confused by simple questions. Okay? Dylan William is a guy who came up with this thing called, I think he found it in one of the schools and he spread it out. He's an academic, he talks about questioning quite a bit, assessments, marking, he's a professor in that. PPPB, that's something you will have to use in your lesson planning once we set that activity, and it's going to be all you guys. Okay? Anyone heard of this before? Pose, pause, pounce, and bounce. We did a bit of that today. Pose, pause, pounce, bounce. I know Ustadha Kulthum would have definitely heard that. Anyone else? Oh, Mufti, you've heard that about 10 times now. So basically, what it is, it's a method of asking a question. Okay? So you pose the question. Okay, so the question, for example, I'll say, why do we need to follow the Quran? A book written a long, long time ago. That's pose. I posed the question. Then I need to pause to give you time to think about it, to kind of take it on board and think of answers. Okay, so pose the question and then you pause. Let people think. And then you pounce on one student, or you pounce on Ustad Shanaz, your name has finally come up. So that's one thing. So I'll ask the question, pause, I'll then pounce on yourself, and then when you give me an answer, I won't just go back to you and then say, okay, what about this? Well, I won't constantly do that. That's table tennis. Okay? So if I ask a question, pose, I'll pause, pounce on one person, I'll get your response, and then I'll hold your response, and then I'll bounce it on Ustad Adil and say, what do you think about this answer? Right? What's your opinion on this particular response? And then I'll get Ustad Adil's response and throw it at Ustad Hussam and say, what's your response to this? So can you see, you pose a question, you pause so you have enough time to think about it, and then you pounce on one student, you get their response, and you throw that or you bounce on someone else. Okay? So that is pose, pause, pounce, bounce. You've got to use that when you're going to be doing your lesson planning in a little while. You have to use that in any kind of scenario. So always ask why, ask difficult questions. Everyone's seen one of these, right? Has everyone seen this?
Yep.
Okay, anyone not seen this at FEC?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, interesting. So that's one. Oh, nursery normally they don't do much of this. Okay. Anyone else not seen it? But Ustad Mufti Hilal could kind of try it out in your next lesson.
Okay.
On Saturday. So this is what we call the question matrix. This can be used from nursery all the way up to a PhD. Okay, all the way up to PhD. Because all you do, either put a text over here, a picture, a video, anything, or anything like that, and then you get the students to ask questions about it. That makes them thinkers, critical thinkers, people who question. Okay? And the purpose of questioning is to get a deeper understanding of it, not just question for the sake of questioning. Okay? So what you do is you get one word from here. I actually made this dice with all these sections on it. So it wasn't the six-sided one. It was, I think, I had about 9 or something like that, and all of them fit in. And we've still got it in the cupboard. It's made out of paper. But then I think we found one as well, a plastic one, and we stuck these things on. And we used to use it in class. So students get a dice. On one dice, the black one that had these words all over, and the other red one had those words. And whichever lies in top, whichever 2 words come on top, they have to use those 2 words to come up with a question about the picture in the middle. That's it. Okay. So, for instance, I quite like this, and I use this quite a lot because it was very interesting. Okay. Now, the lesson was about Prophet ﷺ's last sermon. So the students were doing continuous lessons on the seerah, and the teacher used this picture as as something to think about. Okay? And the students had to come up with questions. So they were initially showed a video. They saw a video from the film The Message on the Prophet's last sermon, where you have the narrator saying all the things and points, and then he put this up and he said, "Okay, ask questions." So I still remember I was just walking into the class for that session, and one student said, so students had to come up with 5 questions, okay, using this. So one of them could be, what is happening? That's a valid question. Question number 2 is, where is this place? Okay, so they weren't given too much information. Now the thing is that the further away you go from the black box, the more deeper your questioning becomes. So one student said, I wonder how the companions might have felt during the last sermon. Right? So I wonder how the Prophet, the companions might have felt during the last sermon. Okay, so we said, okay, stop, that's a really interesting question. Let's stop the lesson there and let's talk about this. So one of the students said, I think they would have been really, really sad because now the Prophet will pass away at some time, knowing that it's the last sermon. And then another, so we bounced the question, okay, so what do you think of this guy's response? So it was the bounce, bounce, whatever. And said, what do you think? He said, I disagree with him. Why do you disagree with him? Because I think everyone would have been happy knowing that they are in the Prophet's final sermon. Not everyone's going to get that chance. Okay, so I think a lot of the companions were happy. So and would that discussion have ever come up, or that kind of thinking, had it just been a lecture about the last sermon of Prophet ﷺ? Okay? So that's how questioning deepens your understanding about topic as well. Okay? I'm going to rush through the next few slides. I just found that for shirk. You can always use something like that. That is shirk just about not ascribing partners to Allah as in the idol form, or is it also about our own idols that we've created? Is it about worshiping ourselves, kind of thing? This is one way of going through zakat, for instance. This is where you start in the picture of zakat. So they ask questions about it, and then you can develop this questioning further by making it more controversial. Okay, so we added the ice cream man in the back, and what we did was we said, okay, these are you guys in the classroom, and this is happening right in front. So the question is, okay, why aren't they helping? Why aren't they helping the poor child, who's dying? And we spoke about the bird and what the bird is doing there as well. And then we're trying to bring students to understand. So we're not saying, okay, you have to give zakat because it's compulsory and it's this much percent. Let's have an activity on percentages. Okay? And bring maths into it because it's holistic. Okay? It's got to be relevant as well in that way. So then what happened was, so you bring them in the concept of the global village, and the concept of ummah comes into this as well. And then there's quite a lot of pictures like that. That humans have gone so far away from helping each other that now the animals that are supposed to eat the human in this case, they've decided to help out. Okay? That's how sad they feel and troubled they are by the state of humans. And then you can talk about zakat. So why do you think we need to help other Muslims? Why do you think we need to help other people in the world? Okay? Even if they're not in the same country as us. Okay? So you can talk about this to Islamic relief. This is a way to introduce zakat. Oh, this was an interesting one where a few classes use this. The world's hunger is getting ridiculous. There is more fruit in a rich man's shampoo than in a poor man's plate. Yeah. So some teachers brought in shampoos and students were able to smell the kind of fruit from them and said, look, this child will not even get the amount of fruit that's in this shampoo. You can do this with anything. Stories from textbook, video clips, text, quotes, pictures, anything at all. Oh, this is interesting. Can anyone remember where this was, where we took the kids? Okay, you smiled. Was there a reason for that?
On the way home from camping?
Yes, so this was where the Battle of Hastings took place. This is the equivalent to the Muslims' Battle of Badr, isn't it? Yeah. So this was it. This is where French influence spread all over England. And I can still remember, it was really interesting because we told Ustad Yahya to lead on this one because he's a historian. Okay? And so instead of telling the kids, okay, this is what this is what this room is, this is what it was for, he asked them like 3-4 questions before they went in. So think about why it's so dark in here. Okay? Why do you think in this part of the castle they would have kept it very dark? As you go in, think about the senses, think about why it's so cool. Okay? What do you think they're protecting something inside this part of the castle from the outside world and the environment outside? So they went in with that in their mind and then they looked around and came out and gave the answers. Yeah? So questioning is a way, and as-su'alu nisful ilm, even though that might be for a different context, but questioning is half of knowledge. Okay? We've got to be devil's advocate, and I mentioned some of this before as well. Yeah? So the if machine, there's actually a book called, I think it's called, let me check. There's, the if machine. Okay, it's a very interesting book. If someone wants to use it, I do have it at home. It teaches you how to ask questions, how to ask meaningful questions with kind of deeper kind of responses. Yeah. There was one thing, I'll just talk about, there's quite a few slides here, but I'll skip some of that. I want to talk about this. Don't read too much about the text. Is it okay to eat meat, so why don't we eat our pets? That's the question. Now, using the ifing way of asking questions, if it is okay to eat meat, then why don't we eat our pets? Can you see the difference between the way we question, the way we present the question? So if it is okay to eat meat, then why? And it's a very cool kind of question, which is quite deep. There's 5-6 different points I could have chosen. We've already spoken about this a bit. So let's move on to, anyone know what this is? And why I put that there? It's to do with Freemasonry. Very indirectly. So there was this philosopher, his mind has just totally left my, his name has totally left my mind at the moment. Oh, Jeremy Bentham. Bentham, yes, Jeremy Bentham. Anyone heard of him before?
His body is in
his head is been chopped off.
No, but his body's in UCL.
Oh, the actual body as well?
Yeah, and it's been embalmed.
Yeah. And his head used to be on display at UCL because he wanted it to be displayed.
And going further, King's College students stole
the body?
No, Jeremy's head.
Oh, interesting.
As a prank.
April Fools.
So Jeremy Bentham, he comes up quite a lot in philosophy and I think somewhat in theology, but mainly ethics and all that. And Jeremy Bentham, he came up with this idea. It wasn't really, I don't think it was ever practiced. It was called the panopticon. Anyone heard that? Panopticon. Panopticon. So combining of two words. So pan meaning everywhere, okay? And opticon is to do with the eyes. Okay? So he presented this idea that instead of having so many guards in prison, and I'll show you how I'm linking it with Freemasonry. Why we've sometimes got Freemasonry, like we overhype the whole thing, whereas it's actually really nothing. Okay? So he said, instead of having so many guards in prison looking after so many prisoners, what you need to do, you need to create a prison like this, which is like a circle form. Okay? where the prison cells are in the inside, okay, and they can only see the inside. And right in the center, okay, can you see that little circle there? So this is like the bird's eye view, the top part. The center, you just need one tower, okay, right at the top. And you just need one guard to control, say, 300 people, instead of having 50 guards to control 300 people. You just need that one person, but you have to make sure that the windows that are there, okay, the guard can only see the prisoners, and the prisoners cannot see the guard. Right? So what that will do, that will create an element of fear in the minds of the prisoners, that maybe he's looking at me now, maybe he's looking at me, maybe he's watching me, maybe he's watching everything I'm doing. And then what Bentham said, then what you can ultimately do is take out that guard as well, because you've created that fear in the minds. So I feel this is somewhat similar to what's happening with Freemasonry. Oh, they're watching us. Everywhere you go, there's cameras everywhere. I think 70% of the cameras don't even work, right? Because someone breaks your window outside Sainsbury's, you go to the manager and they'll have a look and, oh, sorry, that camera doesn't work. Okay? We haven't got view of that. And it's this fear that's been created in our minds and hearts. But then we tend to forget that there is one person, or sort of one being that is always watching, and that's Allah. But we were more towards the whole Freemasonry. But anyway, I can't remember how and why I put that there, but it's the whole thing about questioning. Okay, questioning things around us. So the whole thing, because at that time the kids were always talking about Illuminati, right? So it's to question that. Okay, so Illuminati, who are they? Are they always watching? You need armies and armies of people, okay, to watch every single person. How on earth are they expect? So what they've done, they've created that element of fear. But anyway, everyone's welcome to disagree with that concept. Okay. Yes, this is it. This is the important part, and then we'll move on to the practical side, and we'll get started on now up here as well. This book, Why Do I Need a Teacher When I've Got Google? Anyone got that book? It's a very good book, actually. A lot of the quotes in there are from Wikipedia, and he does that on purpose. I think most of the quotes in that book are from Wikipedia. Okay? Why do I need a teacher when I've got Google? And there's this one page where he talks about someone called James Martin, who's won so many awards and stuff. And James Martin, in his book called Meaning of the 21st Century, talks about 14 problems that the world is facing. 14 problems which they will face in the future. So there are some interesting ones, like even when we did our wudu lesson, we were influenced by some of these points. We actually looked at some of these points and said, okay, how can we, this concept of rivers drying up, how can we teach that? We can do it through wudu. That's one problem that we're solving through our holistic lesson. Okay, mass famine, destruction of life in the oceans. So there's so many things. That's what I'm saying. When we're planning a lesson, you can have something like this in front of you, and then you can think about, okay, what thing in this lesson can I do? What I did in one of my schools that I taught in Barking, I had each one of these points on A3 paper, and it was stuck on one of the walls at the back. So as you're walking around teaching, you're looking at them and thinking, okay, this aspect, how can we solve that problem? How can we solve that problem? How can we solve that problem? That's thinking on your feet as well. And we added a few of our own, okay, Islamic perspective. So as you're teaching, tarbiyah, okay, golden rules of Muslim ethics, how can we meet some of those? How can we bring some of those in our lesson? Adab al-ikhtilaf, something that's very, very important for our madrasa, extremely important. Because we are a non-denominational madrasa, we don't have students from just one type of denomination. So we have students from all backgrounds. So how do we teach students to accept or appreciate other opinions? How do we do that? Stay firm on your own belief and your own opinion, but how do you appreciate the others? Okay, how do you live and let live? How do you do that practically? How do you teach that? Usul al-fiqh, hadith, Quran, inform the students of the different of hadith. Just giving examples of, if there's a point where you can talk about different hadith, and you can tell them, actually, you can't just come to a book of hadith and take it literally and say, look, there's this one hadith, therefore I'm going to act on it like this. No, there may be 3-4 other hadith which contradict this hadith, only in the literal sense, but when you contextualize them, they might be part of a bigger puzzle. And then philosophy, make them think. So we'll do the plenary, we'll do the tweet at the end. And then you'll get a chance to add as many hashtags as you like to this as well, inshallah. But we'll do that at the end. Last point. So now we're coming on to the practical bit, so I'll stop talking after this, inshallah. This is the questioning thing. Now, the thing is, why do we need questioning? And where does it fit in? What does it fit into? What's the bigger picture? Okay. So now, the practical side. What does a lesson plan look like? And how do we put, where does questioning fit into that, and then differentiation, and then the actual structure of a lesson? Okay. So today's objectives for this part is create a lesson plan. So it's going to be mostly your effort now. Okay, I've done my bit, so after this I'm just going to sit in the back and just watch and just hopefully just listen into the discussion. Deliver a micro-teaching session only if you have time. So only if you have time you can present your lesson plans. Okay? The lesson plan. Okay? Now, the lesson plan is similar. Usada, have you ordered?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant, fantastic. So we have the starter. So when you go into a restaurant, okay, you have the starter. Now I can't remember why I put that picture there. Does it look like watermelons, do you think?
Is that salmon?
Oh. So that's a bad starter. I can't remember, yeah. Maybe,
Probably the tradition of a lesson, starter, main, then...
Yeah, no, as in why this picture?
That looks like a main.
Oh,
that looks like It does look, yeah. So I think we'll have to change, just put samosa there instead. Okay, as a starter. And then after that you have the main, and then you have the dessert, the plenary at the end. Okay. So now Muslims came up with the 3-course meal and all the different course meals. So that's why we're trying to use this example here. We're going back to our tradition. Now that was a joke, but it did happen in that way. Now, but before we start on the starter, there's something you get before that. You get the menu, okay? And that's where you find out what you're going to be having for your starter, for your main, and for your plenary. Okay. So now, there's a Diamond 9 activity. Should we do this? Is everyone happy to do this, or should we skip this? Sorry? Sorry? Put your hand up if you would like to do the Diamond 9 activity.
What is it?
Interesting question. So basically, so there's 9 diamonds in each, paper diamonds, in each envelope, okay, and they have 9 different parts of a lesson. And you're gonna, in your groups, okay, we're gonna easily have, I think, 3 groups. You will look at all the different points, of the 9 points of a lesson, and you're going to decide which one is the most important part. Okay. You've got to come to an agreement, and then you've got to decide which one's the least important, not so important. So that's the Diamond 9. Put your hand up if you'd like to do that. That's 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so we have 10, and how many would not like to do the activity?
Starting your ripple.
And who is not bothered about which they do?
I'm not bothered.
I'm bothered.
Yeah.
So 3, okay, so we'll do it then. We'll do it then.
Democracy.
So you just have
Democracy, So you all can turn around here, and I can use that back table. So you've got to make a diamond shape, just as the one shown there.
Then I don't know.
I can easily say what Sad will agree and Sad will agree. In Evelyn Couple, that's the most important part of the day. That is when the sun at the end summarizes the lesson. Everyone is focused, and that's the take-home point. So, like I said, they may have not focused the entire lesson, but that is, that's crucial.
It's true, because if they listen carefully in the last 5 minutes,
they've wrapped the concept.
They've literally got the big picture
in my
of the whole
opinion,
lesson.
that's what I think. And I'll put that at the top.
I think we got to talk about these because we want to make sure that the higher ends are getting what they need.
Okay, we've got about 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Everything's going to work towards I think these two together are good. What's the difference? It's not for learning.
Okay, you've got about a minute. Get ready to respond to why.
We can do a lesson without a lecture.
No, because you're
Instead of what you say,
Okay, 30 seconds.
that would be right now.
Because whatever you present,
I'm the guy. Like on Saturday, for me, this would be really important.
Okay, 10 seconds. 5, 4. You can stay with your groups, but you just need to turn around each other. You can stay with your groups at the moment. 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Right, so let's start from the brothers this time. What have you got at the top? What do you have at the top and why? And I want to get everyone else's opinion on this as well.
Okay, so we've got plenary at the top.
Oh, fantastic. Why is that? Plenary at the top.
Is that yours? Is that okay? Well, we've got plenary at the top.
I didn't, but they
Okay. Okay, you put plenary. Why did you put plenary at the top?
A bit of experience, because in Everton Covered, we find that the students are getting the most out of the lesson towards the end. So when we summarise a lesson at the end, that's where they pick up the most. Also, I feel like students are more focused towards the end.
Okay.
And for students that haven't concentrated throughout the lesson, they can catch up on what they've missed out on in the plenary.
Okay, interesting. Ustad Kulthum, what's your top?
I absolutely agree with them, but since we have 9 of these,
Yes, absolutely.
I put the lesson objective and outcome first.
Okay.
Because we need to essentially know what we're doing, and then I put.
So what would you say in opposition to that point? Why shouldn't they have that at the top? Because you've got learning objectives.
No, they absolutely should in their context.
So why haven't you put that at the top?
I haven't put that there because I also look. We would have to have a briefing to understand my reasoning. But basically, the plenary is absolutely important.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I didn't put it there is because before you know your ender or your plenary, you need to know where you're going. So you need to know what the objective of the lesson is first. So where you're going, and then you know who you're taking with you. So you need to know the differentiation, and you need to know where you're taking them. So how you're going to get there. So you need to know your AFL.
Can I go back to Ustad Adil on that, or the brothers, and how would you respond to that bit about
on learning objectives is again from experience. A lot of times we have a certain objective in mind, but the way the lesson turns out is very different, and the objectives turn out to be very different as well, depending on how the students take the lesson forward.
Okay.
And a lot of the time the lesson objectives turn out to be better than what we intended.
Interesting. What have you guys got at the top?
Creativity.
Oh, creativity. So why?
I feel that's essential for the teacher to think outside the box when planning the lesson and use the creative tools to cater for the different learning needs of the students in the classroom.
Ustad, what would you say to that?
Could you get a repeat on that?
Oh, could you say that? Yeah, could you say it one more time?
I forgot what I said.
So basically, creativity is the most important. Creativity is most important because teachers need to be able to think outside the box in order to help students think, as part of the philosophy, is think more creatively in order to become more critical as well, etc. Is that what yours?
I agree creativity is important, but then going back to what happened in the experience of Ustad Zahida, where she put creativity as the foremost important thing, but then she missed out on the students' understanding of the actual topic.
Okay.
See, and I agree, and coming back to Mufti Saab's point about the objective and the outcome, yes, that also changes in the lesson. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to keep to your objective all the time. But then if your objective changes, then you work to that, isn't it?
Oh, so
Then
there's
your
another
whole-
question to you.
then isn't
To
it?
respond to Ustad Adi, so we have creativity, but it doesn't mean we're going to throw everything else out the window. So that's one of the most important aspects of learning. But alongside that, you have the AFL that comes in. So you're measuring student progress throughout the lesson.
Which one do you have right at the bottom? And why?
We've been moving things around quite
Okay,
a
no,
bit.
interesting. But what have you ended up with?
I don't know, lesson objectives, student progress.
Oh, lesson objectives right at the bottom.
Yeah.
Interesting. So who's got it at the top?
Ours is at the top.
Oh, okay.
Mine's at the top.
We got in the middle.
What's that? Oh, okay.
Finished it in the middle.
Because
Constantly
of
moving around.
it just shows everyone's way of thinking.
Yes,
It's very
absolutely.
different.
Yeah, diverse. One interesting thing, usually, like this is like the normal scenario in a Diamond 9 activity. You can use this for so many different ways. You know, when we did the Prophet's last sermon, so the teacher, what they did was they took the Prophet's sermon and broke it into 9 pieces, and each piece was on a different diamond. So they had to make bigger diamonds, obviously, and it was on a different piece of diamond. And the question they were asked was, what's the most important part in the Prophet's sermon, top and bottom? And the point of this exercise was for students to then think about straight away. So they've got to understand the context in order to be part of this activity and talk about all these, you know, the starter and things like that before the teacher even gives a lecture about it. So you're ready to go, ready to learn. Okay? And one interesting thing happened on Friday. It was the very first time it happened, where we went to a mosque and all of them had the same answer at the top. And all of them had the same answer at the bottom. And it was quite...
It's been great.
Sorry?
It's been
It's been great, yeah. So that was quite interesting. But usually it is different. And the idea is, it depends on how you present this activity. So when we say using questioning or active learning, it can be done in different ways. I've used this activity in about, I think, 50 different ways before. Okay. One of the ones I've used it with 4-year-olds, where they didn't have text on them, they had pictures. So it was about what's the most important thing for a Muslim? That's the question. What's the most important thing for a Muslim? We had the kalima on one of them. We had someone praying. We had the Kaaba, so Hajj. We had Salah. We had helping someone being bullied, helping the elderly, being kind. And with all the 4-year-olds, it was the same thing. Okay? It was the prayer and worship at the top, and helping the bully right at the bottom. Okay? And helping the bully or the elderly was right at the bottom. So that's what happens with these activities. You now get a chance to understand what the students are thinking, and then talk about the different concepts, where you can talk about how Prophet ﷺ explained how so-and-so person, despite them worshipping all day and all night and fasting, but because they had ill manners and character, therefore they will be in hell, for instance, as an example. And then you get the students to do the activity again and see how that influences their thinking. Okay? It's a very simple task, very simple and easy, and yet is there to help students fully understand. I remember I used this in school in Barking once, where it was about organ transplantation. And what I did was, I didn't even use text, I put pictures on there. I said, you're all in hospital, you're all doctors here, each group is a group of doctors, and you are in a hospital, and there are 9 patients. Can anyone think why we have 9 patients? 1 for each diamond. Okay? And all 9 of them are dying, and they just have 1 heart to give to only 1 of them. So which one of those patients is the most important to get the heart? So on the diamonds I had David Cameron on there. We had someone, a mum who had a child, but she was an alcoholic. We had a homosexual person. Okay? And this lesson was being observed by the head teacher as well. So to make it more controversial, we threw all these in. Okay? And
you should have had a head teacher.
We do that in evening coffee.
And
Have you heard of the trolley problem?
Sorry?
Have you heard of the trolley problem, where there's a train track going 2
Oh yeah. I thought we were talking about the madrasa trolleys. Yeah, no. So there's a track and there's a fat person at the top. In that thing. So the thing was, they started arguing with each other, and they all started fighting with each other. So then what I said to them was, okay, look, and they were like shouting. One kid was shouting at another kid on the other side of the classroom, because he was like, he really felt that, and most of them put David Cameron at the bottom, quite a few of them put homosexual at the bottom, and it was quite interesting actually. And ultimately what happened was, so because they started shouting across the classroom, I said, okay, instead of shouting, just go over and have your argument. I'll give you like 3 minutes to have your argument, throw everything out at them, and then come back to your places. So we gave them like 3 minutes. It was just chaos all over the class. And then they came back to the seats, and then we had a debate. And they were quite passionate. That was just the start. Yeah.
Can you give me the opportunity for a minute? I'd like to hear the rationale behind their first. No. Can I ask?
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course. This is
you know, you said the point about the lesson objective and outcome can change during lessons. Of course, I understand that. But should the lesson objective or the outcome at the end, so basically the ending, you feel now has changed, then you change the lesson and you suit the lesson to that ending, isn't it? Then you do what you need to do for that objective and ending, right? So we're not saying that. So when I put the objective and outcome at the top, I'm not trying to say that the objective and outcomes are like the 10 commandments that you need to keep by or put a certificate, put a portrait up on the wall, and you've got to keep to that. They change because lessons are fluid. Sometimes you're not going to get your objective, sometimes you're not going to get the outcome you planned. They change because we're living in we're working in a dynamic environment, and we're living with different people with different attitudes. So you, as a teacher, not that I'm pressing this view on you, I just want to know your opinion. As a teacher, as a guide, we therefore then know where we're going and where we're going to end up. And depending on the students, i.e. the people that are being guided, then we change, and then we know how to get there, and then we change things around. So the ending, the outcome, the objective and outcome changes. It's fluid. Okay, because according to what you're saying, if we just had the ending, and I know your Ustad Hussam and I are probably thinking, what is she going on about now? But if you just have the ending as important, then you're very, very driven, and you're not looking at the wider picture. You have to have.
It's like having a really bad meal that just begins.
Really bad milk.
But it depends what you mean
Okay.
by the ending. By ending, we don't just mean.
So if you.
Just add what you were about to say.
I feel like madrasa was like that. They were always focused on finishing the book, and I don't feel like I learned.
I think that's
I don't have the value for it.
Yeah. So if it's just the ending, then you wouldn't do
theory
that.
complements the objective, because you might have transgressed so much from the objective that the plenary is going directly back to the objective. So in that sense, it is very important because it's addressing directly the objective of the lesson.
But then that plenary is based on now the new objective and outcome that you've realised has happened.
No, because the plenary is directly related to the objective.
Yeah. So that is directly related to that. That is the consequence of that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You would never know if you achieved the objective if you didn't have a plenary.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're saying.
No. This is not just objective. This is outcome as well.
But to measure that, you need a plenary, isn't it?
I think the
Because
question
To measure that, you need this AFL.
So Zahida, you will
I was going to say, the question here is what is the most important aspect, not what is the important aspect.
Yeah.
Because they're all important.
They're all important.
They're all important.
Yeah. So basically, go carry on.
So what's your opinion then? What's your answer then?
Sorry, can we just get a clarification on the difference between AFL?
Just before the clarification, Ustad Sophia had her hand up. Can we just
Mine's totally like different question.
That's fine. Go for it.
My question is, if we do, I know in FEC we don't have like a set timing of how long your starters, or they are for starters, but if you do use this for starters, and majority of the time it takes up the half of the lesson, is that okay?
Sorry,
It takes up most of the lesson, and is that okay?
That's for the teachers to decide. If there's lots of learning going on, then why not? Why just put an end to it?
So you can just use that.
Yeah. So if you notice, I was just standing back here, and you guys were doing. So I ultimately became the facilitator of learning taking place. So if I'm standing back here, that just say 20 years ago, according to Ofsted, would have been bad teaching. Right? Because I'm just standing at the back and just you guys are talking. But now Ofsted have decided that no, that's good learning taking place, because you are talking about the lesson plan and its, all its elements, and debating, discussing it, and you're thinking more deeply about it, as opposed to if I just asked you, okay, could you memorize the definition of a starter? Could you memorize the definition of a plenary? Can you imagine the difference between the two? Right? Should we move on to the next bit?
Oh, sorry. Clarification on the AFL and plenary, the difference between the two.
Yes, we're going to come to them now. But just to add to that, they're roughly the same thing almost. But AFL is more focused on assessment for learning. Plenary is the activity at the end that is where you do a bit of AFL. So it's the activity at the end where you're checking the rice to see if checking a few grains of rice to check to see if the rest of the pot's been cooked. So there's some advice for you there, Ustad Hassan. Next time you're cooking rice. Okay? Alright, cool. So that's the plenary basically. There was some offset stuff, we don't need to worry about that. Okay.
We have one more.
Yes.
No, so I made the point, because they were discussing the plenary. I think I was reading the kitab.
Oh, I did hear that once I was walking by.
Yeah. I was reading a kitab, and there was a man who was complaining about his khushu in his salah to a sheikh. And the sheikh said, well, you do know you're giving salam at the end, right? The whole point being is that you're aware you're giving salam at the end, so the rest of it can be adapted to it. So it was just to back up the point.
So in that example, the salam is the plenary at the end.
Yeah.
Well, interesting point.
And you have animal amal bil khawatin.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So basically, I completely agree with you. I completely, absolutely agree with you. But it's just that.
But not the aspect of the most.
Yeah, it's just not the aspect of the most. Yeah.
We really put them two together, plenary and lesson objective that they work.
Sure. Because we're running out of time, I'm going to do this bit very quickly now. Okay? Is everyone okay with that? Because I do want to give you the opportunity to now try and bring all these ideas together, and you still got to start Danielle. We spent about 15 minutes to talk about SEN.
Sorry, we just said teachers lectures.
Oh, you did? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Naz.
Okay. Right, so
I put it on my group. I took a picture. I put it on our group.
Oh, fantastic.
It depends on the teacher and the lecturer. That could be really good. Depending on who the teacher is.
It depends on who the students are. Who you're teaching.
It depends on the students.
Yeah.
If the teacher is really good, he can work towards all the students as well.
But if you're teaching really young kids, then you're not going to be lecturing.
If you're a superb teacher, you could.
Which hashtag will go for this moment?
Say no.
Fantastic. Okay, cool, brilliant. Oh, Ustaz Saleh, I just noticed you're still here with us. Would you like to add anything to this discussion? Oh, you're observing? Okay. Okay, right. You'll be a very good facilitator, Sheikh. Okay, lesson objectives. I won't go too deep into this. Anyone know what this uncle's name is? Yeah, Bloom. That's his surname, Bloom. Anyone know his first name? You forgot, yeah, don't worry, it's not that important. So his surname is Bloom, right? And he's come up with a taxonomy, a way of figuring out what kind of learning outcomes are there, or what kind of learning is taking place or needs to take place. So for example, in a certain scenario, do we want students to remember something, learn something, or be more creative and create something? Or do we want them to be able to explain a certain concept? So he's come up with this method, okay, which would help us, especially with learning objectives. Okay. So let me give you an example. So I've given everyone a copy of this. Now this is very, very important. This is his taxonomy. He's come, I think he came up with a slightly different one, and then it was the professors later on, they added to it. Okay. So this is Bloom's taxonomy still. So it starts at the bottom, okay, where it's about student remembering things, then it goes up to understanding things, it goes up to applying things, and then at the top it's creating, evaluating, analysing. Usually in nursery, it's more about remembering and a bit of understanding. And as the students get older, it just go up to the top. But even when students are old, you still need to remember things. So you need a good mix of all aspects. So now let's use this as an example. I don't know if other teachers do this, but I'd use it in this way. Now what I've done is, I've done a lesson based on what happens in a lot of madrasas using only the bottom part. Why that's not so useful as opposed to using all parts of Bloom's taxonomy. Okay? So, learning objective, know how to plan a lesson. So know how to plan a lesson. memorize the components of a lesson plan. So if I say to Ustad Saleh, could you tell me the definition by heart, word to word, of a starter? Okay. Would you be able to do that? Yes, you would if you had memorized it. But that's just memorization. And lastly, remember my lecture on the importance of a lesson plan. That is that's actually what's happening, is almost, isn't it? That's one way. If you use it properly, it's good to have some aspect of understanding. So, for example, it says interpret something. So you can only interpret something or talk about something if you've understood it. Okay? And these are basically key words to use when you're setting examples or lesson outcomes. Now, I'll show you examples in a minute. Creating, so create something. Okay. So now I've used some of those different aspects. I've gone up, so started with remembering, gone up the ladder, and I've come up with, okay, understand and be able to explain the basic structure of a lesson plan. Second objective is compare and contrast the components of a lesson plan. So you've done quite a bit of that already. Okay? Why is plenary more important than lesson objectives? You've compared and contrasted that already without me having to tell you or say it to you or give you a lecture on that. You've done that with the Diamond 9. Lastly, create a lesson plan for zakat or sadaqah, or actually any topic for a mixed ability class, which we're going to do now at the end. Okay? That's objective. So, one of the tasks at the end are going to be write your lesson objectives using Bloom's taxonomy. Okay? And once we've done the lesson plan, I'll give you clear sheets of a lesson plan. We give one lesson plan to each group, and we will get them at the end. We might not have enough time to present it, but I'll take a photocopy of each, or a scan of each, and we'll put it on the group. So you'll be able to see that at the end. Okay? Now, starter. What is a starter? What is it for? Oh,
it's just to engage the students.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just to engage the students. It's like the worm that's put at the end of a fishing rod to kind of catch the fish's attention. But we do it for more positive reasons and in a more ethical way. Right? Now, I've given this link over here. That, if you click on that, it will take you to another website I created where there's lots and lots and lots of starters. Okay? Do you want to see a few of them? Or should we move on and we can do the practical? Should we have a vote on this? Who would like to see an example? Who would not like to see an example? Okay, fantastic. Let's move on. Okay. Oh, here was one that we used to use quite a bit at the beginning. It's called the popcorn activity. Anyone done this before? Put your hand up. Oh, one. Oh. Okay, popcorn. So it's a cool activity for the younger kids especially, where whatever your topic's going to be, you write it on the big popcorn, which comes out of the packet. So Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Yeah? Now the popcorn activity is students just have to literally jump out of their seats and shout anything about Isa alayhi salam. Okay? Would you like to try that? Should we have a vote on that one? We actually did it in our previous one, which is quite interesting. But we won't do that now, due to lack of time. So students literally just jump out, and as the students are jumping out and shouting, you can get a teaching assistant to write down each point on the board, and then you can circle some of the important ones that you wanted to discuss, and then you can start your lesson. Okay? Just as an example, that's one way of catching them. They love jumping out of their seats. So why not create an activity where they can do that? Okay? And learn at the same time. Oh, we've done this already. Sorry about that. Oh, okay, we've done that as well. So we've done most of this, alhamdulillah. Main. Now what I've done, I want to tell you more about it. I've done these printouts, which I think I'll literally just throw in the air, and whoever gets what, you can use. Okay. Basically, you've got to first of all figure out: do you want the kids to work individually? Do you want them to work in pairs or groups? And then, what are you going to use as resources for them to use? And how are they going to use those? That's something you've got to think about the main. Okay. So, for example, with Isa alayhi salam lesson, some of the teachers, what they did last week was they decided that kids would go in groups. That's the first thing. Secondly, they would use a treasure hunt or information inside envelopes as the thing that they would use about learning about Isa alayhi salam. And lastly, the method was the treasure hunt, where they would go around again, moving out of the chairs, because that's what they love doing best. So why not incorporate that in their learning? Okay. So that's one of the things you'll think about. I'll give this out in a minute. We've done this. Good. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Now this has been said so much over the years, Now there's professors and academics who are saying, no, this is not as important anymore, the way it's been used. Okay? But still, it's important that during your lesson, you have lots of visuals, okay? You have auditory, lots and lots of listening, which we had today. But at the same time, lots of kinesthetic, so talking to each other, using the diamond nines. So I've tried to incorporate all three in this lesson. Okay? That's the kind of lessons we need to have. In madrasas, most of the time it's this. Okay? Most humans are kinesthetic learners, okay? Because we're Homo sapiens, and we've come to this stage as we are from. We've been hunter-gatherers for a long time. We've been farmers, etc. So we do move a lot in that sense. Okay? And that's why sitting behind a screen is bad for our health constantly, and just working in an office is actually bad for our health because we are not made in that way. Okay? That's why our classes should reflect that fact as well. Plenary, we've discussed that already. It's to find out whether the students have learned anything or not. So Ustad Zahida asking that student, who is Prophet Yusuf in the plenary? Okay? And the student saying, no, I don't know. That's why they say plenaries don't just need to be at the end. You can have them in the middle of a lesson to just figure out, are they doing anything? That's why, if you give like a 30-minute main activity, it's good to, after about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, stop the whole class. I used to put on something called Mahmood News. Okay? And a BBC tune used to play, and it's to be really, really loud, and this to start looking this way. And you tell them, okay, you're journalists, you're going to speak to each other with your colleague about 3 things that you learned today. And then once you've done those 3 things, I used to have a mic. It was cut, obviously, it didn't work. And they used to get really, really excited by it. And they should stand on some students stand on the tables and begin their journalism about what they learned on that day. So that's something that's... have you ever had Mahmood News at Kelmscott School?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
I don't know, I can't remember.
Okay. Because Ustaz Saleh was my student.
Really?
At Kelmscott, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, possibly we didn't do it. But Mahmood News is really good. And finally, send. Last thing, this is where Ustad Daniel will jump in. Yeah. So now the activity is finally here. We've got to try and cut it as short as possible. I should have been doing that. I should practice what I preach, isn't it? And the reason why Ustad Daniel will come and speak about send, and I didn't want to speak too much about this, there's a piece of paper that I've given out. You can read on my comments on that later on. That's homework. Okay. Read this sheet. It's 4 pages of a textbook with a bit of my add-ons for our madrasa context. Okay. So if you read that later on, that'd be good. The activity after, what I'll do, I'll try and resend that in a bigger format. Oh, resend. Okay. So the lesson plan, what you're going to do in about 10 minutes is you're going to plan a lesson. I think let's do 3 groups, so it will be quicker to do it. You have to have the starter, main, and plenary. So 3 different sections. You have to come up with your own activities. You have to have lesson outcomes or objectives using Bloom's taxonomy. You've got to be able to use it. You can come up and see that PowerPoint as well. Be able to show evidence of differentiation, which Ustad Daniel will talk about now. You have a mixed class ability, right? So a class of mixed ability. You have 1 student, and I'll give out this PowerPoint to everyone as well now. A student with severe vision impairment, so he's blind. It's a blind student. You have a student who's deaf. Okay? You have 2 students who are ADHD and require full attention and have learning difficulties. And you have 4 children who are more able and they finish the task before everyone else and they get bored after they've done all the tasks. And then they start messing around. You've got to plan a lesson. Should we have 1 topic for everyone? Let's do Prophet Isa Islam. Should we make it easy? Because we don't have much time. Anyone want to suggest a topic? Evolution. Any topic that's...
What age are we in?
Oh, so it's a mixed ability. You can decide that. Okay. Let's just do end of primary school. So you're doing year 5 and 6. Okay. Age year group 5 and 6. Yes, sir.
Can we do music?
Okay, music. That's the topic. Yeah. Okay. So before you start that, Ustad Daniel will come forward and talk a bit about the special needs side of things. Ustad Daniel.
Got some handouts.
The 2 separate ones.
Just a quick statement.
I mean, you can keep these as well.
Where's that background picture from?
That is from Wazir Khan Mosque in Pakistan. Yes.
Serious?
Yes.
We're debating Turkey and Pakistan tomorrow.
No, I just wait till Chef hands out the handout. Okay, Mona asked me to do something on differentiation, but I think as a speech and language therapist, the first thing I think for me anyway, what we should be differentiating is our language, particularly if we're thinking about kids who have SLCM or speech, language and communication needs. So what I've done is I've got, I made some strategies on the back, and this was from a speech and language therapy resource book. It was aimed at primary school kids, but it's just as important for secondary school kids as well who have SLCM. So it's helping every child to succeed list. I'm going to talk through it quite briefly, and I'm not going to bore you and read through the back sheet. You can read that yourself. But
is that homework?
Could be homework, yeah. But think about the kids that you work with. When I was going through these strategies, alhamdulillah, I realised that in the nursery classes particularly, they definitely use a lot of these strategies a lot. So again, having in mind that this is someone who finds language very, very difficult to comprehend and to express themselves. So the first point, repeat the question, emphasising keywords. So really narrowing your language down to 1 or 2 points. Go do this, for example. Focus on relevant parts of the picture. So if you've got pictures that you're using with the children, just highlight that part to them. Cue with the first word, because. So again, thinking about someone who can't express themselves, because it's again thinking critically as well. It's really important that they can express why they're doing something. You said lots there. Just tell me about. So I think stereotypical child. You have someone in mind who talks, doesn't just not get the point. Yeah, focusing on that one key point that you want them to talk about. Has it happened to you? Yeah, that's quite a good one as well. So again, thinking about experience, going back to experience for that person. Use role play or puppets. Again, I was in a nursery class on Saturday last week, and it was the most fun lessons that I've been in. I've been in a lot of nurseries, alhamdulillah, in my time. And last week, I could see the amount of learning that was going on, and that the kids' experience there was second to none. And role-playing puppets is really important. Again, thinking back to what Imam Ghazali's point there about learning through play. Imagine I'm an alien part. Thinking about a child who finds concepts quite difficult. So, abstract thoughts. Yeah, can you explain it to me as if I'm an alien? Yeah. Does everyone get that point? Yeah. Okay. What else? Yeah. Just get them to expand on what they're saying. Ask another child the same question. So that's basically using another child as a role model. Modeling the correct grammar. So what we hear a lot with some of our kids, they might mix up their he's or she's, using their past tenses incorrectly. Just correct them and emphasize it in the correct way. Ask the question from the lower language level. So again, adapting your language so that's more towards their level, and using question symbols. So pictures and symbols is really important, and when we're trying to get across a point to someone who has sort of language difficulties. And I said at the back there is some more strategies that you can read through yourself as a piece of homework for you guys, inshallah. When I want to be
used during the lesson planning activity.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. When I wanted to talk about differentiation specifically, sort of leading on to that, we've been doing a lot of work about on SEN the last few weeks, especially with Sarah. What we're going to be doing, at the time being, at the moment anyway, is we're going to break off and we're going to think about how we differentiate. What do we do when we differentiate for our groups, and how do we do it? So you can either discuss in your pairs or your groups. Think about differentiation. What do you do to differentiate, and how do you differentiate?
and you can discuss. I'll give you a couple of minutes, inshallah. Yes.
So the studying might be too hard.
If you have, we're going to have beginning a program, so pictures are used instead of words. So it's more about using pictures, it's more visual.
For what?
Yeah.
Why? So there's a picture instead of a question.
Where is really a good market? You're going to challenge them further.
So yeah, so the question is how do you differentiate and what do we do to differentiate?
You're going to challenge them. You know, by differentiating, you're also demanding behavior as well. So you know the students are really smart. They're going to start punching just not everything. So what?
I thought I was going to memorize. I can't memorize
So that is the differentiation. Anything because you know, try to do something 20 minutes and finish. You still got to wait for 40 minutes to finish. So if you don't have anything to do in that time, the class can go.
Give me 30 seconds.
that is my experience, even though those are tied up things.
I think we should make that like part of the application. That was it, to finish
Alright, just finish it off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Ustaz Saleh to make some notes from what people say. The idea behind this is what I mentioned about our aim for SEN. Inshallah, it grasped quite well last week actually when about how big we can have this, because as far as we're aware, there's nothing that's been done in any madrasa when it comes to SEN so far. So our ultimate aim at the end of this project, if you like, is we plan to have like a resource booklet of some sort where we have strategies and things to do with children with SEN and how a madrasa can approach it. And the good thing about this is the points that you make now could essentially feed into that resource booklet. So think of it as a sadaqah jariyah for you guys, because we're going to have the aim of trying to publish that with Suffolk, and they'll distribute that across, their 400 madrasas across the country. So this is sort of groundbreaking stuff here, inshallah. So back to differentiation. How do you guys differentiate? And so you can start with that side.
I think it's important to recognise the learning needs of the students in your class.
Yeah.
So whether that be if they have a visual impairment, hearing difficulty, dyslexia, or whether they are gifted and talented and they need to be set extension tasks.
So identifying the needs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I find it really interesting that the mosque that you went to said they have no SEN students. So does that mean they put everybody in the same learning requirement box?
Yeah, so for them, first of all, it can mean, it kind of says that they don't understand the concept of special needs.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, I don't think they fully grasp the whole idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
And or it could mean that if someone with extreme special needs has come to them, they recognise that as special needs and they just said to them that
no, you can't come.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of the job here is about raising awareness about what is special needs in the first instance, and that's what the booklet will do. We'll go through what is ADHD, what is dyslexia, and how can we get towards that. But so identifying the needs. Okay, great. Brothers.
So do you think it could be just a lack of knowledge, so not knowing what ADHD is, or not knowing about
It is.
autistic
It is.
spectrum?
It is.
Because I'm
It is
sure
lack
these
of knowledge.
madrasas, I'm sure these students are present, but they just don't understand this concept.
I think that's where we got to go and need to go and help, because if I didn't come to first, I wouldn't know what a SEN child is. To me, every child would just be the same.
It's also about knowing your students.
Or they're a naughty child.
Yeah.
They're all trying to get cast aside as the naughty one. Okay. Yeah. So back to differentiating.
I think when you build a relationship with your students, you start to understand their strengths and weaknesses, and then when you understand their weaknesses, then you can address them.
So understanding weaknesses and strengths. Okay.
It's also about working across the board. So I know like some of our students, they submit an SEN report from their schools. So talking with parents, seeing if there's anything that's been raised in school, and seeing what we can do about that as well to cater our lessons for their learning needs.
And I think that's a very important point, because that's what usually happens with Daniel's role, where parents. So what we thought was, instead of taking teachers out of each class and speaking to parents, we thought an easy way of doing it is speak to Ustad Daniel, he can summarise it and then speak to teachers about that. So our SEN department, which we're going to start growing, will become the main mediator and then pass information to teachers. So you don't have to directly kind of communicate with parents, because it is distracting to the learning if it's during the weekends. So that's definitely very, very important, and something that we're building on as well.
Tailoring the task to a student's passion. For example,
Motivation.
my class
Great.
who loves
Yeah.
drawing.
Yeah.
So if other students will be writing a big paragraph, he can maybe draw pictures related to that. Along those lines. But he's not so interested in writing, and he finds that boring.
Well, when I was trained to be a speech therapist, that was one of the main things that we used. Motivation. Yeah, what are they interested in? And again, that's something that we do greatly at FEC. Thinking about Safe and his website designs. Thinking about individual passions and using that for the greater goal.
And that's something that we want the special needs department to kind of take on board and help the teachers out with. We always have someone to help you with special needs stuff, and we'll have 1-2 more staff members just focusing on that to help out.
It depends on the students, of course. So firstly, the most important thing is to be aware of their need, and I call it. It's interesting that it's called need, because just as we need food, drink, all the other desires that we have, there are things that they are intelligent.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just a need that needs fulfilling, and that's because something's not there at all.
Absolutely.
And so
it's a
if
difference.
we're aware of that first, then we can address it. And I also want to say something about the actual listening to the guidelines as read as well. Because I think all of the students, all of them, the basic need that they have to meet their teacher and listener in class when it comes to Quran and Tajweed is to have my undivided attention. And it's extremely important, because I've seen with all my students, especially Alia Nakul, she likes everything in order. She loves everything in a neat, organized way. And that includes my attention, undivided. If I'm going to be distracted in any shape or form, and it's not just Alia, it's with any of my students, they do get frustrated and irritated that this is my time.